We are so proud to be bringing you this, the most info-dense dissecting coverage of Paris Fashion Week in the industry. Bonjour, fashion friends, and welcome to the mega video. With 10 full days of fashion and 35 brands, this channel is the only place on earth where the magic of runway shows comes to life. We take you behind the scenes and right into the front row, all while dodging rain and analyzing everything from Hermès to Valentino to small brands that are awesome that you haven't heard of yet. This is the most comprehensive look at the most exclusive fashion events in the world's most sensational city. Buckle up. It is time for another unforgettable Paris Fashion Week, which is generously brought to you through viewer support on our Patreon. We are way far out, and we are going to Issey. And this area is like super pretty. We've never been here before. Women's wear is ultimately what makes me such a huge fan of Satoshi Kondo's work at Issey Miyake. This is the show that we get most excited about most often. I'm like buzzing with excitement here. The work coming out of Issey Miyake can no longer be ignored. I mean, if you've watched this channel before, you know that we have not shied away from praising their incredible creative director, Satoshi Kondo, who has created nothing short of a renaissance since taking control of the house. Daniela and I often find ourselves with open mouths as we're trying to piece together all the nuances of what Kondo-san puts into a single show, which is what makes his work the most exciting and promising in Paris. And I'm not exaggerating. And beyond the incredible fashion, which we are going to get to here in a second, the location for this season was stunning. The venue enabled them to host a half indoor, half outdoor show. Our seats were inside. All the guests sat on stools made of the leftover paper that's a byproduct when making their cult favorite and globally famous pleated clothing. It felt like a good choice considering the theme for this season was paper. Okay, listen up. The way that Issey Miyake approaches themes in their collection is nothing short of a masterclass. Just from a literal place, fabrics this season integrated paper into their composition directly. And this is where Issey gets extra praise from us this season. The Miyake brand uses polyester frequently to achieve that fresh, bouncy look. And for this brand, as well as a very small selection of other brands, I find their use of polyester is purposeful in that it doesn't just serve the purpose of cost cutting. This season, I gotta give them their flowers. The sheer amount of natural materials in this collection is a radically new step for this era of Issey Miyake, and I am not even slightly mad about it. The thought process of the team this season was pretty simple. It is a paper-themed show, so they used paper in it. The luxuriousness of Issey Miyake comes from this innovation-first mentality. The luxury is knowing that these clothes are as considered as they can be. And most importantly, just to clarify, even though we all know Issey Miyake for their beloved Pleats Please brand, which is made in machine washable, all polyester, mainline Issey Miyake has a long history of experimentation with all sorts of fabrics, including paper, which is clearly being referenced in this show. So my personal favorite Issey Miyake show by Mr. Kondo was this one that had a big emphasis on squares. And even that theme has a long history with the full lineage of the brand. In the case of this show, however, the team needed washi paper or linen washi paper blends or wool mohair washi paper blends to execute the whole collection. What I'm saying overall is just this. The materials used in this Issey Miyake show, big check of approval. Great work. It seems like we're going back to the roots of the house while moving into the future. Okay, now, concept. Have you ever tried to make paper from scratch, like in grade school or anything? It is a full process that starts with a screen and a bath of what's called paper pulp. It's no wonder then that the process of making paper seems to be mirrored in the way the looks emerge in the show. The first three looks are called O, referring to the watery first step. These looks were just breathtaking. The movement is great, especially the sheen felt uniquely outside of the realm of what I would normally expect from Issey Miyake in a super exciting way. Satoshi Kondo is showing us new unexplored parts of Miyake's universe, and he's integrating it so seamlessly through this mastery of concept-heavy collections. The next looks are made from washi paper clothing. It's 100% hemp linen to be exact. Issey Miyake refers to these washi garments as kamiko. These Kamiko looks are emblematic of his mindset of connecting the brand to Japanese artisanship. Like last women's wear season, these floral looks were all inspired by different Japanese flowers and herbs. And that appreciation for craft is an exciting development and kind of a leap for this brand. And that hemp linen washi fabric was created by Awagami Factory. It's a company that engages in the 10 centuries old technique of creating the most luxurious and elite washi paper on earth. Then comes these looks, which are all folded in this soft fabric that's reminiscent of origami with those really crisp lines. You start the collection with these water looks, then you get your paper looks, and then you create something out of that paper. In this case, origami. I love that. Okay, so here's 3 other things that I loved about this show briefly. 1, these 3 wrapped cord looks, stunning. Powerful idea, still looks humbly beautiful. 2, the decorative floral eyewear is super unique, fits perfectly with the show. I haven't been able to stop thinking about these. 3, these pressed floral looks, which kind of reminded me of their beautiful experimentation with something similar for the APOC Able exhibit from last season. Ethereal, perfectly imperfect. This show is categorically and without question Satoshi Kondo's best runway show at Issey Miyake. He gets literally better every season. We need to talk about why this work is being ignored. Why is everyone not freaking out about these clothes constantly? I unfortunately never see Issey Miyake in people's top 10 shows of the week listicles, despite it absolutely deserving the top spot in that lineup. I bring up these questions to ask whether there might be certain biases that are pervading people's thoughts about fashion and what fashion deserves to be shown in Paris. Whoever the gatekeepers are, you fortunately cannot stop him. Issey Miyake is headed for success. Kondo's design team is having to work 10 times as hard to get industry attention, but their efforts are clearly working. Tell you what, I'll just say this. You go watch any Issey Miyake women's show from the last 2 years. Come back, tell me what you saw. I will let you be the judge of this. This is our first ever Dries Van Noten show, and it comes at such a momentous time for the brand. The most commercially successful member of the Antwerp Six has retired after a 38-year-long career, showing his uniquely exquisite, vibrant, and sophisticated clothes. My personal favorite Dries show is Spring 2015, just the most radiantly beautiful, ethereal runway show, one of the most so that I've ever seen. And I think this is where we can discover something about the complexity of the Dries Van Noten brand. We all know the Dries hallmark is the best pattern matching anywhere on earth. Seriously, no one does this better. But alongside those bold human-made prints, the brand creates this beautifully effective juxtaposition with organic and natural elements. But one way that same organic feeling was expressed through this show in particular was the seating, winding and curving around this otherwise bare-bones building in Paris. This clip here is from The Flood. You can see this organic path that all the models take, and that path is just so beautiful all on its own. Just the path that a group of women walk should not be this beautiful. Florals are also another obvious organic element of this brand. We know that Dries has had an advanced relationship with florals, both in his metric ton of entirely unique floral prints on his clothes, as well as in his personal life. The Dries documentary shows us his beautiful home and garden. And if you have not seen the Dries documentary yet by Rainer Holzheimer, it's the best fashion documentary ever made. In my opinion, it actually shows process, which is really rare. If you haven't seen it before, after this is done, you should watch it. Okay, yes, Bliss, we all love Dries. Who designed this collection? It was his studio team. And actually, with the fashion industry musical chairs rumor mill raging harder than I think literally it ever has in the history of fashion, I assumed that Dries Van Noten would have their new creative director just kind of walk out at the end. There's no WWD exclusive, there's no breaking news. I felt like that would be a very subtle kind of if you know type way of announcing the new creative director. Plus, if you did that, it wouldn't be overshadowed by other creative director announcements. But that's not what happened. The studio team came out. However, I am thrilled to say that our first Dries show was nothing short of excellent. And the ways in which it was excellent stem from this fresh view of the Maison. Though we did learn via Vogue that the studio team was pulling a lot from Fall 97. And that off-rip does make sense to me. There is always a need for a brand to maintain some sort of continuity through creative changes. And I mean, especially at a show in which the eponymous designer is not only alive, but attending as a guest, there does need to be some kind of reverence and honoring of him. The ways in which this show was fresh, however, were very exciting. Lingerie details in lace trims and embroidered appliques that resemble bralettes. Wonderful and youthful push forward. To me, it seems to appeal to a younger demographic than in the past, though it's still not far outside the desires of the current Dries customer. We're signaling change while also remaining true to the identity of the house. Good signs. The shoes at Dries, it's always a hit. I've heard actually from a friend of mine who's a big shoe person that she loves the shoes at Dries particularly because of the angle that they're pitched at. They're a bit more, literally laid back than the typical extreme angle of high heels. According to her, it makes those heels some of the more comfortable ones on the market. The lace-up detailing on the shoes fits well with the kind of lingerie-esque details in the collection overall, and I love that both in the heeled and flat versions of the shoes. Studio collections are always interesting to look at from any brand, but this has to be my favorite studio design collection that I have seen from any brand to date. You could feel how thoughtful the collection was. When the studio walked out at the end of the show for their victory lap, they seemed excited to pass by their former boss, Dries, who was beaming the entire show. This moment for the Dries Van Noten brand was huge, but I also think that this moment was pretty personally important for Dries himself. Not many designers get the chance to witness the legacy that they leave behind. That's true of many of the most important artists. Dries got to do that on his own terms. And us, as the audience, we can rest easy knowing that this brand is not going anywhere. The brand is in the hands of talented and knowledgeable studio team members who deeply understand the codes of this house and how to continue them. I truly believe that this is the start to a great new chapter. This show was beautiful. It was one of the highlights of my week. We are on Rue Faubourg Saint-Honoré. We are walking up to Sotheby's, where we will be seeing Enfants, Déprimés. Danielle and I have had a good amount of setup for this show, where we were able to attend the last show with all of the cars and the crazy outfits and the hammer. And then before this fashion week started, we went to the ERD store to look at the product from that show.
Hell yeah, babe.
They did some very, very unusual stuff, and they made it the right way. The materials were excellent. The cut of the clothes was really cool. I think all the pieces are in place for them to really have an excellent show this time. I am really excited because it feels like they have entered a new era. And also, this is like a bucket list item for Danny because she watches Sotheby's auctions online all the time, and so she's like, oh my gosh, I'm going home. Do you know what mise en scène is? Mise en scène is a kind of fancy word to describe in a stage play or in a movie the set and all the props on the set. This right here is mise en scène. So like if you have a scene that's in someone's office, let's say, and they have a messy desk, what kind of messy desk? Is it like gross messy, like old food, or is it messy just like a lot of papers messy? Mise en scène helps a lot to help you, the viewer, get immersed in what that scene is trying to do to you. Okay, so runway shows use mise en scène, but it's usually just an afterthought. But Enfants Riches Déprimés mise en scène needs to be studied by every other house. It is executed flawlessly. This season, ERD installed custom-built cages around Sotheby's. These cells were not vintage finds. They were designed and custom-built for this show. 3 cages in total. One was a series of connected cages that held the instrumentalists who performed throughout the show. It's hard to describe what it's like to walk into a room and make small talk with people while standing 7 inches from a silent person who is not just in a cage, they are locked in a cage. Little detail, their sheet music was on the ground in front of them. The second cage was in kind of the main room. Similar to the cage that they installed at the store in Maxfield, LA, it held a single guy who mostly laid on the cot while an old TV flickered until the show started. At that time, a man entered the cage to shave the kid's head in front of everyone. When the shaving was complete, the man relocked the cage before the show continued as a more standard catwalk show. The third cage is what we're going to talk about for a moment. It was a single cage with one guy and a little TV in it. The kid inside spent the hour before the show seething. Just seething. Do you know what a radical revision is? It's an exercise that's used in creative writing programs to try to force writers to think about their own work differently. There's a lot of different strategies for radical revisions, but the one that I was meant to do went like this. My teacher took a specific poem that I had written, one that I'd actually spent a ton of time on, and she made me recreate that poem in a different medium of art. It could be a sculpture or a short film or even a playlist. The point was I had to take my poem and move it not only outside of poetry, but outside of the realm of writing and turn it into something completely different. I think that you can see ERD as a radical revision, but put a pin in that because we're going to come back to it. I had the pleasure earlier this year of sitting down with Henry Alexander Levy, the founder and creative director for ERD, for a long conversation about his life and his work. He shared a little bit about his history with addiction and his recovery, and how some of his work is sorting that part of his life out. Henry specifically shared that many of the looks in his shows are characters. He refers to them as junkies. We're going to talk about the junkies that actually walked Spring 25 in a moment, but I want to take some time to talk about this guy for now. To get a little bit personal here, I was personally in high school during the cultural golden era of black tar heroin. I thankfully never personally got involved with that, but I knew a lot of people who did. I actually lost 2 friends that way. So I'm not speaking from personal experience per se, but I have certainly watched and heard direct accounts of what we are about to talk about here. If an addict gets arrested, like obviously they don't just throw you straight into fucking prison. You get just put into a local jail, right? They take all the shit out of your pockets. They take your shoes from you. They do a big old full body search, and then they put you into a freezing cold holding cell. At that moment, the moment when you go into the cell and it closes, for addicts, there's a timer that starts counting down in their head. I have 4 hours before I start getting sick. What in the holy fucking fuck am I going to do? Withdrawals are, I'm told, unbearably painful. But the time leading up to when you know you're going to get sick and you know you're not going to get anything before you get sick, that waiting period is a very, very scary time. ERD is kind of a radical revision of extreme human experiences. For the cages, at least. That's how I saw it. And the clothes were great this season. Let's talk about them. The bread and butter of Déprimés is their sterling silver hardware, which is most popularly expressed through their belts. It's their hero product. They designed a bunch of killer variations on the belt this season. Sorry that I don't have like some incredible story to go with it, but these just look so cool. They take a lot of liberties with the custom silver hardware, seemingly wanting to plug it into as many use cases as possible. Like trouser braces. We remember that suspenders are stretchy and braces are stiff, right? So these braces, these are sick looking. We have these little ornaments that's a circle with a rat, kind of like a hamster on a wheel. The rat is a general motif for the ERD brand more broadly. A full umbrella that they made, and these kind of cummerbund waist trainer type things where they're held in place by this massive sterling silver hook. And if that was a little bit confusing for you, here's a great example of what those look like with no other adornment from last season. Those braces from earlier got repurposed to be a hip chain. And here they're just used as a general piece of ornamentation, similar to another classic ERD motif, the spoon. Also, I could not get over this look in particular. First off, in case we forgot, this is a spring show. Do you know how deep a leather fetish has to be for you to be willing to wear this in July? Crazy. But also, notice that this is not a biker jacket. He's actually wearing what's called a lame, what we monolinguists would call a fencing jacket. That's a garment type that they've actually explored last season, and I'm happy to see it getting the leather treatment. This junkie is also rocking thigh-high leather boots, leather pants, leather opera gloves, a standard ERD belt, and one of their waist trainer type belts complete with these other things. Y'all, I actually got really fixated on this look, and I think a lot of that fixation was on the model. He embodied the emotions of this look perfectly. Props to this guy. I don't know if he's a model or an actor or what. He nailed this. But also, I could not stop thinking about these things. What the fuck are these? Remember, this hook, this is part of the waist trainer belt thing. We are just talking about this and this. Funny little anecdote here. I actually posted this to my story because I could not figure out what they were, and we got some incredible responses to this. Lobotomy tools. Those are embalming utensils to get the brain out of the nasal cavity like they did in Egypt for the mummies. Aha. All these are quotes. It's a lockpicking set. That's dental equipment IDK, why it's decorated like that. Those are precision wood carving instruments. And then the business head of ERD messaged me directly to tell me that this is a button hook and this is a hairpin. And as it turns out, these are both vintage pieces. Could have fooled me. There's so much custom hardware in this show, I just assumed they made it themselves. Button hooks take us back to a time when depressed rich kids literally would have servants who would help to dress them every day. Adorned silver hairpins harken back to similar figures of history. The BDSM elements become ultra clear with this look, which makes a direct reference to the 2002 movie Secretary, which you can kind of think of as like 50 Shades of Grey with more jokes. On a similar note, we have kind of a classy dominatrix here with a subtle hand-stitched black on black key shape on the left side. Key to my heart. But yeah, once you start looking for all the little kick flips they do with sterling silver especially, these outfits open up a lot. For example, I learned this season that most of Henry's collections start with a single object and everything else blooms out from there. Last season, apparently, it was the sterling silver hammer. This season, it was this jacket, made almost entirely of belts. We have another piece that's likely using dead stock vintage textiles, somewhat in line with ERD's use of one-off dead stock items like this piece from a year ago in spring 2024. Much like the hairpin and button hook, the occasional use of vintage objects, and here textiles, is never used to save them from having to make something. It being vintage adds to the world building overall. You can imagine Henry hitting some appointment-only consignment shops in Paris, then drifting through a small estate sale, then attending an ultra-niche evening sale at Sotheby's, and coming home with 12 meters of hand-woven fabric from the 19th century. Why that textile in particular? Henry seems to operate on what Daniela actually coined this term, emotional temperature. The emotional temperature of this fabric speaks more to the artistic goals than any empty reference to the Sex Pistols or something. It's the ineffable elements, the je ne sais quoi. We also have a beautiful piece that seems to be based off of what's called a chapan. It's a traditional nomadic piece that would be used in Afghanistan among a bunch of other Central Asian cultures. Afghanistan, of course, is one of the main sources for processing illegal opium, which is used to make heroin. The details on this coat are extraordinary up close. Heirloom type shit.
You got an amazing one, one amazing photo.
There's always lots of little details in ERD shows that are really easy to miss. These heeled boots have the front cut out so it can frame a little flash of red in the socks, which makes a massive impact on the ensemble overall. This model carried a cage with a little rat inside of it, and that same rat unfortunately declined all requests for an interview. The aesthetics of ERD shows are so dialed in, they're so visually airtight, that when I first encountered the brand, I essentially thought this is just an overpriced t-shirt and hoodie brand that basically exists to throw parties and have cool runway shows, but very little else. Well, we made a showroom appointment this season, and Daniela and I inspected everything. It checks out. The prototypes and the samples were all fully lined and finished, and I saw a great deal of care in the textiles that were chosen and in design decisions generally. Henry happened to be at the showroom and pointed out this jacket in particular. He said he had to try a few times to get the tone of red right. I can't quote him directly, but he said something like, red jackets are difficult because it should be special. When you wear it, you should stand out. But if it's too red, you're never actually going to decide to put it on that night. So it has to simultaneously be muted but bright. You can almost tell from the video that the jacket was made in this beautifully distressed linen. The distressing processes done in manufacturing for the jacket have set it up to age beautifully. If the future owner of that thing takes care of it, their kids will fight over it when they're dead. And I love that we only have you on camera when you are smoking. I feel like that's good for continuity.
Mm-hmm.
I am really proud to say that if you want to dive deeper into ERD, we already have some great resources to check out on the Patreon. We have the massive interview with Henry that I mentioned, along with a shorter interview as well. The Patreon also boasts a shit ton of other extended interviews. Like, we have interviews with well-established designers like Stefano Pilati, the God, who's a living legend who led Saint Laurent for years, Marina Yee, who's an original member of the Antwerp Six, Leon Emmanuel Blanc, a staple of the artisanal space, Jeffrey B. Small, who needs no introduction on this channel. We also have a ton of interviews with new designers like Ire, Kartik Research, Heliot Emile, and the current CD of Courrèges, Nicola Di Felice. We also have more interviews with Yan Vanessa than you could possibly watch. Go subscribe right now. Folks, it is not an understatement to say that this decade of fashion will be looked back on in the future as Demna's era. Since Demna started feeding us the truth of our own nonsensical, funny consumerist habits, his ironic tilt on the world has been unknowingly absorbed by countless other designers. You can hardly look at the fashion industry without seeing his influence everywhere. Demna is the designer of our postmodern times. Everything before him feels obsolete, and everything after bears the mark of his work. We use that statement a lot to talk about the impact of a few different designers, though at its core, that statement really applies to Demna. It is our first time with Balenciaga, and I have to say, this feels like it's been coming for a long time. There's always a super chaotic and frenzied atmosphere of fans waiting for a glimpse of their favorite celebrities at these huge shows, but the Balenciaga team was handling it very gracefully and professionally. Like most mega shows, this one occurred inside of what appears to be a constructed tent near the Invalides, specifically where Napoleon was buried. The tent was in the signature bleak Balenciaga gray color, lined on the inside with black velvet. It was very ominous to enter in the absolute best way possible. Balenciaga manages to create the feeling of unsettling in the most elegant and poignant ways I've ever seen. Of course, most notably in their clothes. Some special attendees sported some looks from the previous ready-to-wear collection, as well as some stellar couture pieces. That hat is sick. After almost 10 years at the house, Demna is still innovating. In fact, we got news after Fashion Week that Demna's contract has been renewed again, and I am thrilled to see it. I find many people overlook Balenciaga's incredibly thoughtful balance between commercial product and industry-shaking design. Today, I am here to tell you that in fact, Demna's Balenciaga is in its golden era. It is better right now than it has ever been. Does that surprise you? You probably have not been looking close enough. Let me show you how. Baseball caps are just one small accessory that's a staple at Balenciaga. There have been dozens and dozens of cap designs during Demna's tenure. They even came up a while ago with this idea for a cap where there's these two notches taken out of the sides of the brim to make it easier to see through your peripheral vision and also to wear a cap with sunglasses. But this season, the baseball cap turns into this cap that covers your entire face like a mask, with enough visibility to still let you see out of it safely. Importantly, this is not just the design team pulling a baseball cap over their face and saying, okay, walk the runway. There are clear points of purposeful design in this thing. There's a bridge for your nose that enables you to wear the hat mask accessory with the stability of a pair of sunglasses. And all these detailed images, by the way, are provided by this Instagram account, MyFaceWin. I don't know how to say that last part. MyFaceWin. They're a member of the team at Balenciaga who documents the innovations in tons of detail and who made a lot of this in-depth analysis possible. So those caps are also a continuation of the anonymity theme, which has made itself present through Demna's career both at Vetements and Balenciaga. There's this tendency for all people to try and biographically link someone's art to their life. And it's not always accurate to do that, but in this case, I do believe this anonymity theme is an extension, and Demna's interpretation, of the anonymity theme present at Maison Martin Margiela, where he worked briefly. Speaking of Martin Margiela, let's talk about Demna's relationship to Martin Margiela, specifically in this show. The 47-meter, 150-foot-long runway was a giant dining table, very similar to the runway featured in Maison Martin Margiela's Spring 1996 show. Unlike the Maison Martin Margiela show, where only one guest took the opportunity to sit in the actual front row, my guess is that everyone else was too intimidated. The table for this show was teeming with the biggest celebrities, the biggest brand ambassadors, all these crazy buyers and couture clients. They are very literally sitting at Balenciaga's table. Okay, so this show includes a lot of trompe-l'oeil. It's everywhere. Just as a reminder, trompe-l'oeil is when you are playing with perspective on clothes. Like, have you ever had an annoying millennial friend show up to a wedding wearing this t-shirt? Okay, so A, that is trompe-l'oeil. B, that guy is an asshole. And C, this would sort of work for Balenciaga, wouldn't it? Like, not actually, but kinda. Margiela released that shirt. I'm almost positive. I have to be a little bit brief here or else risk getting too bogged down in the details. Margiela's Spring 96 show, that show with the giant table, featured trompe-l'oeil with their screen-printed photographs of dress linings printed onto other dress linings. So this inspiration starts a conversation that strikes me as deeply relevant to Demna. The first is a conversation Margiela gets into about the nature of copying and replicating clothes in his own work. Demna has now taken that to a far greater place throughout his career, even if it is ultra bleak. Demna notices how people copy one another today, and it goes as far as women getting into the same type of plastic surgery as others. Like, there are YouTube accounts that just keep track of celebrity plastic surgeries, and it is so sadly apparent sometimes that many of these women are going to a plastic surgeon with the same photograph of one woman and saying, "Make me like this." Like, we are so past the point now of just stealing her look. In this show, Demna isn't just letting you steal some girl's effortless lingerie look. He's making it easy for you. You can just wear her skin. Yup, this look is lingerie, but is actually, in fact, a bodysuit leotard complete with a turtleneck, and then another set of leggings with shoes attached, completing the look. I legitimately did not see the turtleneck on my first 3 viewings of this show. The nude illusion in this look is so effective. It was a great idea. The way I did actually finally notice was these little microscopic seams that you can barely see in the attached gloves. And once I did notice those seams, it just gave this really uncanny feeling to the entire look. And there is something super unsettling about putting on a whole bodysuit as underwear. Like, kind of like, let me slip into something more comfortable. And then she takes off her lingerie and her skin. It also kind of hints at this objectively funny conspiracy theory that all world politicians are actually lizard people underneath their skin and clothes. But okay, let's go back to the cap for a second. Did you happen to wake up this morning with a breakout on your nose? This product is sincerely trying to create a solution to that kind of problem. Demna seems to have hit on this idea that despite being as public-facing as ever, and despite us all knowing way too much about each other, we are the most secluded that we have ever been in human history. He is trying to give you the option to take that seclusion out into the world with you, with yet another disconcerting pair of Balenciaga sunglasses that will make you the most interesting person at Trader Joe's, and simultaneously shield you from the experience of, heaven forbid, interacting with anyone. All the models in this show were wearing sunglasses except for 3 of them, which happened to be Mintu Vasala, Eliza Douglas, and Yuria Scuti, staple models for Balenciaga for dozens of shows at this point. And these models are such staples for Balenciaga that they have fan merch as part of their product offering. These models have so perfectly represented and embodied Demna's vision that they have become minor celebrities in association with the brand. They kind of represent this if you know status. And why would you cover up such iconic and important faces with the sunglasses designed to provide A-list celebrities with a cover-up? And that's actually where we find more similarities with Margiela. This iconic Margiela design was part of his fall 2005 collection, which was presented as a tabloid magazine. Balenciaga has taken that idea and adapted that into these neoprene-lined and cropped cocoon jackets, which are Demna's less literal interpretation of Cristobal Balenciaga's cocoon silhouette. We all know celebs cover their faces to move past the paparazzi and kind of avoid photos, and obviously this is an insanely good idea for Balenciaga to include conceptually, considering its relationship to anonymity and celebrity. But I wanted to point something out really fast. Notable amongst these jackets is the one that says fashion designer in what looks like spray paint, and you know what? How about you unpack the symbolism of that? Anonymity also makes its way into the collection with these corset neck funnel coats, which, after seeing it, makes me wonder how no one came up with this sooner. I fucking love this idea. I do. This is my favorite part of the whole collection. They also infuse that same corset into leather jackets and trench coats to create these bustier dresses, which kind of use the sleeves as a beautiful draped tie at the front, reworking a garment into another expertly. We know that a lot of the Balenciaga look is messy and disheveled, and sometimes when you see a runway look that is in this chaotic style, you assume that it was just a styling exercise. But these clothes are patterned, developed, and sold to appear like the stylist backstage just said, okay, just tie this tracksuit jacket around her waist. Okay, send her out. One of my absolute favorite parts of the show were these looks which featured the corset style tight lacing backs. These flowy 80s inspired dresses look demure in the front and then boom, like a mullet. Amazing idea for these dresses. My favorite variation of this idea was on the jeans, actually. The corsetry inspiration in the coat necks and these ribbon backs and the bustier dresses are all a nod to the brand's couture heritage and brand founder Cristobal, which can be summarized as they just used corsets that are done up in the same way. But instead of looking too far to the past, Demna is presenting us with the most innovative modern corsetry, with these bustier frame tops which wrap around your torso like a slap bracelet. And look, it wouldn't be on brand if there wasn't like something unsettling about this. The illusion of concave breasts is just, it is very unsettling and very effective. Concave breasts also add to this part of Demna's feminine and kind of glamorous designs that heavily mock and undermine what femininity even is. What is supposed to be classy ends up looking really creepy in the best way. The bags have been ways of achieving that recently, which for the last few seasons have been clear parodies of the Hermès Birkin and Kelly. This time, the Kelly dupe features these crease marks as if you had carelessly folded your bag into a suitcase like a paper bag. It felt like a combination of the bags from the LA season. It's like they crossed the Erewhon grocery leather bag with the Kelly. Balenciaga's shoes are famous for being, for lack of a better word here, fucking awesome. This season is no exception. This super lightweight basketball sneaker with an inflated footprint looks like it was inspired by a literal basketball, and is also meant to be a loose reference to the Foamposite, less in the actual shape of the shoe and more in the way that these lines are created. Other accessories include priority tags that airlines give you for your luggage, but they're made out of leather. And priority airline tags are a super overlooked status symbol that you can attach to your parody of a Kelly bag while you walk back to your seat at 46K. Demna seems to be making his customers the butt of the joke, but it's not malicious. Balenciaga customers want to experience everyday luxury, and Demna is surely selling them that, while also reminding you that once you have the Birkin, once you have the Kelly, like once you have the first class seat, it's never going to be enough anyway, so who cares? By my version, at least it's funny. Demna is inviting those people to be in on the joke with him. At its core, Balenciaga embraces our powerlessness and our inability to tackle and fix our most disturbing modern problems and the general unhappiness that they create. And much to the derision of people who don't get Balenciaga, Demna points out that we have created these outcomes for ourselves. Demna looks at a world full of uncertainty, full of forces so much larger than any individual person, including himself, and tries to help us cope in the way he knows best. When you have such a large, uneasy world to pull from, how could you ever run out of ideas? In my opinion, it is intellectually dishonest to say that Balenciaga keeps doing the same thing. Also, via Vogue, Demna backstage said that fashion needs to not be based on fear. I think that when Demna was escaping war-torn Georgia as a young boy, he realized that the only thing that helps you deal with tragedy is to reduce it to laughter. In the most elegantly disturbing way possible, Demna's vision of Balenciaga is his way of helping all of us come to that same realization. Also, if you want to learn more about the Margiela seasons that Demna was pulling from this season, you can check out these 2 videos. We've dedicated whole episodes to them. I don't feel fully comfortable doing this up on the street because it is raining incredibly hard right now. I think this is the second Rick Owens show in history to happen during the rain, which, I mean, obviously no one likes being rained on, but I think aesthetically this should be pretty cool. So last season at the men's, it was one of the most unusual shows that Rick has ever put on, and I assume this will be at least on par as far as the craziness is concerned. But as always, we will see. Time to cry. Miraculously, though, the sun came out just moments before the show even started. There was then plenty of natural light and a freshly glossed stone floor to drag dress trains across. A lot of you watched our review for Rick Owens last season, where we went into an enormous amount of detail about what he was doing in that show. So Rick always does his shows in 2s. The men's come first, and then the women's 3 months later have the same title as the men's show, and it's usually kind of the completion of that idea. Usually the men's is more safe, it's a little bit more commercial, and then the women's is like kind of the more fantastical version of those same ideas. For the last 6 seasons, that's a year and a half, Rick has been fairly autobiographical with his show titles. First with the title Lido, that refers to a residential area in Venice, Italy, where Rick lives and also where some of his manufacturing is located. Next were the men's and then the women's show called Porterville. That's the small town in California where Rick grew up. It's very conservative there. He didn't feel much himself and he was very excited to get away from it. Now with the titles, we are in Hollywood. We've already had the men's Hollywood season 3 months ago. Now we have the women's Hollywood, and that is the place that Rick escaped to in order to become the Rick Owens that we know today. Both the Hollywood men's show and women's show are very similar in their setup. Each has over 200 models, mostly students, friends, and people Rick admires. A few seasons ago, Rick hosted his shows in his Parisian apartment that also doubles as a showroom. It's a really beautiful place. He wanted to use a location that was less grand as a designer's kind of quiet way of protesting conflict. And I'm guessing that's just referring to the combined conflicts in Ukraine and Palestine. Fashion designers don't have much power over international armed conflicts, obviously, so many designers make small gestures just to acknowledge it. Like a couple of days after Ukraine was invaded, Giorgio Armani had a scheduled runway show, and he just came out and said, hey, in light of everything that's happening, we're gonna do the show in silence. Despite Rick's apartment being quite large, it has a similar square footage as like a medium-sized American house, say. And despite them holding, I think, 3 shows back to back to back every season, a ton of longtime Rick fans felt left out. And I'm paraphrasing here, but this isn't something that I guessed about. This is something that they talked about in the show notes. So as a token of inclusivity, the runway returns to the Palais de Tokyo. The center of the courtyard was filled with water. There were large smoke machines, and atop each side of the palais, there were robed figures throwing huge white flower petals the entire show. Much of this was a review season where we get to see some of the greatest ideas that have come out of Owens Corp. Review seasons are actually pretty common in the fashion industry among all types of designers. Margiela, Lee McQueen, Giorgio Armani has had review seasons. A lot of folks actually get pretty angry when they attend review seasons. They'll often say something like, the reason that they tuned into the runway show or attended it in the first place was to see new work. But in defense of review seasons, we're actually just gonna stop the footage here for a second. I just wanna ask you a question. What are, in your mind, the greatest hits of Rick Owens? Like men's, women's, accessories, doesn't matter. Just like, what are the standout items? So if we took a poll, I imagine just immediately at the top, it would be Geo baskets, Kiss boots, Ramones. I mean, if any clothing went to the top of that list, maybe it would be pod shorts. But for the most part, I feel like most people who call themselves Rick fans are so unfamiliar with his design language outside of just the ultra commercial product, which usually is footwear. Okay, so review seasons give designers a chance to show the audience what they consider to be their own greatest hits. And fortunately for us, Rick is not the kind of guy who's going to lean on the most commercially successful work possible. There are Geo baskets in this show, and there were Geo baskets in the last show, but they are definitely not the focus. The differences between last season and this season were pretty straightforward. Both shows weren't really gender specific. Neither show was limited to a certain body size or body type. The men's show was tons of white looks. This show was mostly black looks. The men's show saw most models walking in a phalanx. This show was pretty freeform. Models could kind of wander as they saw fit. Also, I really loved seeing the crust denim drag on the wet ground amongst all the petals. That was a personal highlight. It was really beautiful. Hard gear shift for a second. There's this strange phenomenon that I first kind of observed with Lady Gaga in her art pop era. And that's when an artist builds most of their own identity as an artist around being an outsider. And then they suddenly get really, really popular. I actually remember the first time that I saw Lady Gaga on television. It was before the art pop era, obviously, but it was during Thanksgiving. And I remember that my uncle looked at the TV and said, I get that there are some people who like this, but this doesn't seem like it would be nearly popular enough to be on TV. Like, this is so weird. It just seems like it would be too niche. And he's kind of right. At first glance, she does seem mega niche, but obviously it turned out a ton of people resonated with her work. So then the mass influx of pop fans might sort of be in conflict with the OG weirdos that gave her a career in the first place. You can kind of see where there might be some tension there between those two groups. Of course, the outsider elements of Rick are what drew people to him. He likes nice fabrics, he loves glamour and iconic moments and opera and romantic movies from the golden era of cinema. But Rick also likes when those things are a little fucked up. The specific recipe to make Rick Owens' design language has been ultra attractive to millennials and Zoomers that just really do not want a life like their parents. That group used to be pretty small, and now Rick is one of the most recognizable names in high fashion. I'm not telling you anything new here, obviously. Rick being good at his job is likely a big part of what led you to this video in the first place. Rick has found himself in a beautiful and strange place. His work connects with people because his message could be simplified to just say, if you're a freak, there is nothing wrong with you and you don't need to change a thing. Shave your eyebrows off, get the nipple piercings, get a tattoo of the C word on your foot. So it could become an issue when the once underground, still awesome fashion designer wants to invite fewer people to their runway shows. Suddenly, hundreds of people who felt like they had a permanent position feel left out. The exclusivity works no problem for, like say Fendi, but with Rick, it felt weird. I mean, it must have felt weird because they changed it back and talked about it publicly, which I actually think is pretty cool. Transparency like that is pretty difficult to find in the industry. I liked that they did that. And look, I'm not sure how Owens Corp should handle logistical issues or the expectations of their fans, but I'm personally very grateful that this brand exists in its current form. I like that Owens Corp is a fucking huge company. When I was a child, I believed very firmly that popular things are inherently bad. The only artists with cultural capital had to be obscure and unsuccessful. But as I've matured, I've grown pretty grateful that there's at least one freak who is driving culture. Hermès is everyone's favorite luxury goods company. We all love the bags, the blankets, teacups, costume and fine jewelry, watches, baby toys, towels, scarves, twillies, paperweights, and fragrances that they make. Much less talked about, however, is their ready-to-wear. And frankly, if you're proudly talking to your friends about how Hermès is your favorite, but you aren't focused on the ready-to-wear, you may be missing out on the best stuff. Hermès is just as much a fashion brand as every other brand that we cover here, even if you have to look a little closer to see it. One of the things that I love most about Hermès is their ability to adapt to the modern consumer without compromising their incredibly high standard of quality. We all know that technical fabrics have taken over the clothing landscape, and not just in athleisure. There genuinely seems to be more large-scale adoption and preference for some measure of technical wear in people's closets. What I think is remarkable is that Hermès seems to have successfully perfected their proposal for that problem. This specific mesh fabric seemed to make up a bunch of this collection. It sure looks very beautiful, but it's stretchy. You might think that it contains some elastane, and you would be wrong. This is entirely made out of silk. That is a technical mesh fabric that is entirely made out of, I don't know. That's a big deal. In fact, its design even counteracts some parts of wearing 100% silk. Like, some silks can make you feel kind of overheated and sticky when you wear them, but at Hermès, you can wear this breezy, beautiful silk fabric and not worry too much about how delicate it is, only that it looks great when it's layered with more of itself, which I always love seeing. Miss Van He seems to have an impeccable grasp on layering, especially at the waist this season. So briefly here, let's just talk about the bags. We are in an era of Picotin supremacy. This slouchy bag is currently having a huge moment, despite the fact that it is part of the classic handbag canon. I think people are finally appreciating how practical and casual this bag is. Speaking of practical casual bags, have y'all seen all those memes about all these people that are carrying $3,000 wicker bags this past summer? Leave it to Hermès to make all those people feel sorry for not patiently waiting for their craftspeople to whip up an even better version, which is IMO way prettier. Despite the many quintessential feminine pieces and looks, Nadege brings the boyish attitude to her Hermès collections that really complicates the looks that she's creating there. It adds a lot of richness and slightly old world ethos. Apart from the layering, the other element that creates this chic boyishness is how the materials are used. Leather jumpsuits, boxy leather jackets kind of channel the jobs of those who work with their hands. Some of these cuts look almost like something a mechanic would wear, albeit the most chic mechanic of all time. Or maybe a pilot, or a pipe fitter, or a landscaper. It's so effective, and it lines up with Hermès' philosophy of practicality that has always been a part of the women's wear at Hermès. These are clothes for women that do things. And the way that they've done that makes other brands that have adopted this boyish charm in their clothes seem kind of shallow by comparison. The styling here was also pretty powerful. The windswept bangs of otherwise very clean hair is perfect for Hermès. Sophisticated, but not like inhumanly sophisticated. Hermès, in my opinion, is the opposite of stuffy. They've focused all their attention onto creating otherworldly quality to enable their customers to get the pinnacle of practicality, the pinnacle of function. Hermès understands that practicality is how quality can count in the day-to-day lives of their customers. We are now in a car driving over to see a bunch of custom fabrics and textiles. Akris is really underrated. I'm not exactly sure why. The clothes are some of the most considered and unique in Paris, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that they make most of their own textiles. Textile development is extremely expensive. It's something that most brands that show in Paris can't afford to do, and when they do choose to do it or they make a budget for it, it's usually maybe one fabric per season. Akris does, I think, more than anybody else in the industry. If someone doesn't know about Akris and I need to get them caught up to speed, usually the first thing I tell them is that the changing room at my local Akris, instead of a wallpaper or paint on the walls or lining it with some kind of like hard material, they just line it with undyed horsehair, like the tail hairs of a horse, except it's millions of them lining the changing room wall. And on top of that, the look is often very practical, very easy to wear clothes that just make everyone look great. Really, really wish they made stuff for men. Something that I've always appreciated about Akris is their truly Swiss sensibility. It's all really beautiful, but with no fussiness. Always practical. Akris excels at clothing that embodies the best feelings of home, both in their signature lovely appearance and most definitely in how those clothes feel when you're wearing them. Akris produces most of their own textiles, and their focus on textile quality is just A+. It's excellent. This house loves showing just how much range can be created within a classic garment and a classic silhouette. They do an incredible job convincing me that true design builds on what already works. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. In sticking with that way of working, Akris managed to take us to the most beautiful and sophisticated place we've been with them yet. After the show, when we spoke to Albert Kriemler, he said that he was inspired by the Ducale Palace of Mantua, Italy. He saw the work of Renaissance painter Andrea Mantegna in the famous wedding room of that palace, and that's where Albert's ethereal color palette in this collection came to him. Notice the pinks and the whites and the beiges as well. This room in particular is known for creating a private hosting space for the ruling family that was beautiful and ornate, but notably not overly ostentatious or gaudy. And in that way, it seems kind of like the perfect fit for Akris. That idea of beautiful and ornate, but not ostentatious or gaudy, that was reflected in this stunning, jaw-dropping room where the show actually took place in Paris, embodying that same beauty of those frescoes that Albert was inspired by, but more pared down and a little bit more spacious. We know that frescoes are painted in layers, and Albert brought that into the beautiful layering of sheer fabrics all over this collection. It's a great way of applying his inspiration of layering in a unique and beautiful way. Though with Albert, the inspiration is always backed up with a ton of technical innovations in the textiles and how those textiles get used. More than ever, I'm convinced that these world-class fabric innovations are just a normal part of what Albert views as his ultimate calling in creating the most considered women's clothes that we have ever felt. As always, we needed to speak to Albert because he is the best at communicating his own ideas.
But it was all about the second and third layer, this fascination of transparency, but then I wanted to make this transparent clothes also wearable. Because, you know, there's so much transparency on stage, which you cannot put. You sit down once and it's full of creases. So I went into the technical fabrics. This is a techno net. Here I used, this was the first skirt I developed, this headband.
I've heard, yeah, they were telling me about the hat bands.
Sewn on tulle, and then layered on another layer of georgette lining. So, you know, it's sensational to see the three-dimensionality in the move, and this is also an interesting new transparency. And I mean, this skirt, especially also in disguise, you just put into your luggage, and it always works, but it's fantastic. And then I could go on with ribbons and superposed techno organza, trapezoids. I said, we have done pleats. I want to have appearing pleats and just layered several ribbons. That was that skirt, this, you know, and you saw how interesting these clothes were in the movement, and
now is this the water resistant material
yes.
that you put in the show notes, the little swatch? Or was
no,
that for look
that's
one?
the raffia. The show notes are the raffia, because raffia is the fabric of the season, but I'm proud. I've done this fabric 3 years ago, and then already it was too stiff. Touch it in the collections now, it's always stiff. There's no soft raffia. But I had it worked on a jersey base, and I get the structure, the weight is there, but there is a human touch to the clothes, and it's the first time that I had the courage to do a pant, a jacket, a t-shirt, a varsity jacket, and a dress.
Albert, the thing I really love about your clothes is that it is always, it's apparent when just looking at it. You don't have to know the details. You don't have to have necessarily touched it, though touching it helps a lot. Yeah. But I feel like on these pieces, like this skirt, the levels of transparent layers on top of each other, when you look into them, there's no actual see-through. They're not sheer anymore because there's so many, but it's like looking into water because of how you've used it.
For sure.
I mean, so much of this, it's just so beautiful.
The feminine and the frivolity, I solved it really fresh and new through fabrics and workmanships and newness like this, to bring a collection full of newness to my fans' wardrobes.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Albert.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure.
Okay.
Yeah. There are some pieces of art that have been created to resist your interpretation. You can think like Moby Dick, The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot, or anything in the magical realism genre. In Moby Dick, specifically, there's this whole chapter where the author is speaking to the reader and condescendingly saying like, oh, you're probably wondering what the whiteness of the whale represents, aren't you? Well, here's a few things that it could represent. And then for an entire chapter, they just list off different theories for what the whiteness of the whale could represent, all of which are meant to kind of mislead you in your interpretation of the symbols of the book. I often feel like Rei Kawakubo is doing something similar at Comme des Garçons. She sets up her own work to resist the viewer. Actually, okay, let's talk about being a viewer of a Comme des Garçons show. Not what it's like for me or for you necessarily, but just from the perspective of a wide-eyed newcomer, someone who is curious but inexperienced with Comme des Garçons. You go to the address of the show. Outside are people lined up against barriers, even though Comme des Garçons shows don't include influencers or celebrities. It's all just customers, buyers, journalists, collaborators, and friends of the company. You walk past a lineup of employees meant to usher people in the right direction and greet guests that they know personally. You take your place. The lights go down. The show begins. Again, we're thinking here from a neutral bystander's perspective. This almost seems purposefully designed to kind of ward off the non-believers. Like anyone who doesn't score super high on open-mindedness is going to just completely shut down when they see stuff like this. But for our perspective, let's assume that our first-time hypothetical viewer is in fact very interested and open-minded. They don't understand, but they want to. So they take in the whole show. They patiently watch and closely examine each look as it slowly shifts across the runway. They applaud when it's done. After the show, they want to understand what all of that was. They are still open-minded. So they consult the show notes. The title of the collection is Uncertain Future. The show notes only say, quote, confronting an uncertain world with air and transparency could signify a kind of hope, end quote. All right, no big answers there. Is there anything to see or say or think about this? What should we do here? Okay, no more waffling. Just to be really frank with everybody, I have personally struggled a lot with this review, what to say about this show. I'm proud to say that a while ago we released a massive video that dove very deeply and info-densely into Kawakubo-san's process and work. Much of that video dealt with a very different era of Grandma Ray's design language. The current era that we're in right now is exactly what you see here. It's ultra chaotic. Conventional themes become almost impossible to pick out. I've recently had to learn how to type on my phone keyboard without looking at it so that while I watch shows live, I can take a ton of notes without ever averting my gaze. Most of my notes for this show went something like this. Ray clearly likes flowers. They're one of the only recurring images in this era of her work. It's always plastic flowers. This season seems to be designing environments rather than clothes. Certainly, nearly all of Ray's work, again, in this era of her career, they've all been big enough to be environments. Most examples from previous collections of massive looks, though, they seem to be more something that the model is carrying as opposed to nearly completely closing off the environment with little legs coming out the bottom. This dwelling look, I guess, in particular, kind of looks like a yurt. Grandma Ray loves the culture and clothes from Central Asia. There's actually this one pretty famous among CDG people photograph from a couple decades ago where she is in rural Georgia. It's an absolutely beautiful photograph. Multiple arms here on this look that seem to be a bizarre depiction of pregnancy. And, pregnancy, that thing where someone does for a couple of months have two sets of arms. And some of these do feel very womb-like, but I don't know if I just want to say that an ensemble that encloses is inherently womb-like, so this one is left a little bit open. But I will say that these habitat looks could be complicated by Comme des Garçons' unofficial slogan, "My energy comes from freedom." One of my notes says, "New Cage crinoline just dropped." The looks that involve splattered blood are likely a political statement about invasions in Ukraine, Palestine, and now Lebanon. This could be put in line next to other fairly direct political statements made by Comme, like the print on this ensemble that was designed by artist Elisa Yoff. The restraining motifs here, stuff like barbed wire, reference similar conflicts. We could even reach back for another political message, like the show that paid tribute to the victims of the Paris bombings from a few years ago, but, tribute to just a tragedy and protesting something political. There may need to be some differentiation there. I don't always know what exactly to say in order to bring these elements together, but I am willing to put in the work. I never want to try and trick folks into thinking that I understand or can explain something when I truly can't. I do feel confident about the analysis that I've performed on Kawakubo-san's work in the past, and I stand by all of it. But I know what my homework is now. Hopefully, I will have a better grasp on this current era of Comme des Garçons that we're in next season. And please, if anyone has anything to add, I read every single comment. Okay, this is an independent brand that I am pretty excited that we are finally getting to see. Milk of Lime. This is a showroom visit. I'm really excited because I've seen their products online for a while. They really like doing innovative, kind of different stuff. It's all very well considered world building. I think we've literally been talking for 4 years.
Something like this, yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. In the past, they've shown at Berlin Fashion Week. Now they are here in Paris with their showroom. I am really excited to finally see this stuff in person.
So we're Nico Verhagen
and Julia Ballet.
And together we make Milk of Lime. And yeah, we worked a bit in Paris. We were graduates from the Academy of Antwerp. And then we moved to a small town in rural Germany where we started our label 2 years ago.
This was a great idea. This is one of my the big standout looks to me during the show, which is crazy because it's like a fairly simple button up, but I love this thing.
But yeah, it's like the story behind it, we call it the dyer shirt because it's inspired by tie-dye, like shibori dyeing. And we just like the tied state of the dyeing process, and then that translated into like outerwear afterwards.
Before like a t-shirt is tie-dyed, it's wrapped up almost like this,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, it's a bundle and you want to create some sort of a pattern. But I always loved what the bundle looks like, and I was like, can't we just like make this a feature of the garment itself? So we experimented a bit like on the sleeve. It's a bit impractical because, I mean, it can be a cool effect, but I care for garments that you can actually wear in daily life, so that's like.
And this is no more inconvenient than a necklace would be. Like this.
No,
is,
it's
this
actually
is just
it's an extension of the collar, so it doesn't wear any different, but it's like a little embellishment. You can open it and see what it did. Maybe it has a cool shibori, like it's a finished collar. It's just tied up, but we like it this way, and it's called the dyer shirt. And we, for the first time, dyed it with natural dyes, so it's all flowers, barks, peels of vegetables. This is redwood, so it's like chips of the bark and the wood.
Love that. What else do we have?
I think you might like this guy. It's a bomber jacket we covered in silk chiffon. The idea was to like create a garment covered in mist.
Oh, that feels great.
And yeah, you see all of the insides, the cotton padding, and yeah. Also, like I like that you see all of the threads that keep in there, and yeah, it's also this thing of like you have a very utilitarian garment, but you make it in like a weird couture way, where it loses all of its function, but it becomes kind of like a padded dress almost. Do you want to talk about your favorite piece actually?
Tell me about it.
Yeah, it's a bit funny because I think it happens quite often that you have a spontaneous idea kind of 5 minutes before the show, it feels like, and you're just like whacking it together. And this was a classic example of us buying a fabric, we like it. We didn't plan to put this in the collection. We were like, what is this vanilla color? It has nothing to do with it. But I saw this big roll and I saw how it would fray. And I was like, we have to include this kind of fraying thing. So yeah, I just like whacked it together, actually. Included some of the cut-offs from other pieces. So we had lace laying around, but I just kind of worked intuitively. Oh, this is beautiful. I like this personally. I don't know if this tells a story. Turns out, this is the opener look. It tells the story perfectly. It kind of encapsulates everything about weathering, the way we work, the fraying.
And the nice thing is we can finish it like an unlined blazer. Mm-hmm. So like you just overlock it with like a super fine overlock. And then, yeah, it really has such a nice, like, I don't know, waist cut.
It's between an outerwear and a blouse thing, which is kind of interesting, I find. And the heavy crepe thing allows me to be a bit nerdy and couture. So all of these lace pieces, they're hand embroidered. Wherever it's the black flowers, I stitch them on by hand, but the thickness of the fabric allows me to do it invisibly, so I can go in between the layers. Yeah, I'm a little nerd.
Could y'all kind of walk out just the general idea behind Milk of Lime generally? Because I feel like it's something where you both have put a lot of thought into it, but maybe if someone had just seen one product, they maybe wouldn't get that full idea. Could you just talk about the brand generally a little bit?
I love to, explore the fabric and see what I can do with it and what it gives me, what it allows me to do with it, and not force another one.
We miss poetry in fashion a lot, and this is something that we definitely want to bring back.
Bringing back poetry in fashion is a very difficult road to choose as a designer. If the work of Milk of Lime interests you, you haven't even seen the half of this thing. They include some crazy process information and a great deal of little details that will become crucially important in 20 years when a documentary gets released about them. The Patreon is super cheap, and it includes their interview and a metric shit ton of other interviews and a massive series where I go through my wardrobe and explain all the little fun stories and details about the clothes I wear every day. Those episodes are honestly a ton of fun to make. Join the Patreon for all of that and a shit ton more. I want to ask everybody something. Do you know how hard it is to be a relatively new fashion designer right now? The luxury audience is usually not looking for new names. So you know how you get noticed? The honest answer is gimmicks. And don't get me wrong, gimmicks are not always bad. Some of the greatest fashion moments in history have been gimmicks. But generally, I think we all know gimmicks suck. But it's the most tried and true way to get talked about. You do something crazy during your runway show, and then everyone on Twitter is like, OMG, so crazy, ah ha ha ha. And then a few of those people stick around and they say, oh, but like some of this is kind of cool actually. And then they follow you on Instagram, and then slowly they become more and more of a fan, and then hopefully eventually they buy something. Many folks, especially fashion industry folks, do not like that our current luxury landscape encourages gimmicks. If you are one of those people, you are going to love Mame Kuraguchi. And frankly, if we're talking about gimmicks, the designer, Maiko Kuraguchi, bases a great deal of her work off of Japan's history of artisanal goods. She pulls inspiration from Japanese ceramics, basket weaving, etc. I can think, just off the top of my head, of 5 big visual gimmicks for a runway show about Japanese ceramics. But instead, Maiko elects to show in the most beautiful Japanese restaurant in France. The guest list is curated and short. At the entrance to the venue, guests are served tea. The runway's ambient soundtrack is undistracting. When the lights go up and the show begins, Maiko actually stands to the side and takes in her own show in silence. I don't want to be the white guy throwing around Japanese words, but the ma at these shows is always tuned perfectly. The clothes truly get to speak for themselves. There are 2 main points that I notice about this season in particular. The first is that Kuraguchi has honed in closer to a uniform this season than I've ever seen so far. As always, that uniform is identifiably Japanese, but it's never so Japanese that you would feel out of place wearing it as a non-Japanese person. These uniform styles are ones that you could just pick up 3 variations on, let's say this look, and maybe this look, and then just swap them out every workday for the foreseeable future. They're inoffensive, but they're noteworthy. They are special, but they're not distracting. And don't get it twisted, Miss Kuraguchi absolutely has range. There's a number of very memorable looks in this show. But I want to emphasize something in particular that's easy to miss here. This collection makes matronly clothes accessible to young women, and that makes me very happy to see. And we have to do a very big clarification of terms here. When I say matronly, I don't mean it as in like grandmotherly or stuffy or whatever. There needs to be a term for a genre of women's clothing that is confident, that is grown up, that is undistracting, and cool. So I'm really only using matronly for lack of a better word here. These types of clothes are often better made. They're more purposeful in their cut, and that's certainly the case here. The texture on this dress is not typically something that one would see in like the hot girl section at Macy's, but it looks beautiful. This is the best oversized shoulder shape that I saw all season. And the texture, like, OMG, the texture of these dresses is just so beautiful. I love these clothes. Extremely excited about this one. For the first time on this channel, we are going to the showroom of Lauren Manoogian. Lauren seems to be filling a pretty massive gap in women's wear, in that she makes clothes that are largely using natural materials but have a very specific point of view and voice to them. It's one of those brands where when we first saw it, it immediately sparked our curiosity, and luckily she has a showroom in Paris despite not doing runway shows here. So very fortunate that we get to include her. Normally when we start showing a brand for the first time, we like to introduce you to the designer themselves. Lauren is in another country right now, so her partner Chris is going to be talking to us about the collection.
Yeah, so what we like to try to do each season is try to work into different textile experiments with the same base fiber. So spring, summer is going to be always cotton heavy. Obviously for our fall collection, our pre-collection, we're working into alpacas, cashmere, different wools. But for spring, it's interesting to see kind of how much you can do with just cotton. What Rachel has on, this is a wovens piece. The bottom is a blend of cotton and linen, and then the shape is created by basically creating a pattern out of elastic. And then the cardigan on top, it's actually cut pieces of jersey, so like a t-shirt, and then we hand knit it together.
Oh, wow. Like you twist them into little...
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
my gosh.
And then if you see the accessory that Rachel has over her shoulder, this is the same material that we use for hand knitting, but then we do hand crochet. So that way, it's a good example of using the exact same material and then changing the process. You know, the cardigan obviously is really drapey on Rachel's shoulders, but then the crochet makes it really functional as a bag. So, and again, that's the base material is exactly the same. We tried to shoot this a lot. I think it's a really kind of versatile group in terms of how it can be worn. It's literally heavy, but then when it's put on, because of the jersey and because of how it stretches, it actually doesn't feel too overpowering when you have it on.
Man, this is dense though. Like,
Yeah.
this is, I mean, to me, the thing, because obviously t-shirts have become the default for so many people at this point. I think the only way really you can do like a considered t-shirt at this point is to just do something really crazy. And this fits that mold. Like, this is almost like thunder clothes type of thing, like for sensory, like therapy type stuff. Like if this was wet, it would weigh like 40 pounds.
Yeah, maybe. But yeah,
awesome.
if you feel it on the rack, you're like, oh my god, this is really heavy. But in the images in the lookbook, or when you see the model moving in it, it actually isn't heavy. It just feels like an object, like you have an object on, not a piece of clothing. You know.
To me, it just feels more dense than heavy. Like, this doesn't feel unwearable at all. Like, it feels like it would actually be much cozier than just like a regular, really lightweight t-shirt.
Yeah, that's interesting you use that word cozy. You know, it's like typically you associate that with like a winter sweater or something, but to use that word and have it make sense with something for spring that's made of cotton, it's like that's kind of what the intention was. This is on the woven side of things, the lightest weight that we've ever used. It's really sheer, so what we had to do is figure out on the piece like where you want it to be sheer and where you don't. So if you look inside of all the garments, you're gonna see we actually hand stitched second layers in there. So this is a little hand stitch here, and then that way it makes it not so sheer from the waist to where the seam is, but then from the bottom it still really moves as if you're kind of wearing nothing. So we did that to the skirt. Obviously the top we kept it as is because the shearing itself kind of makes it less see-through. I really like these pieces. I think if you see the Runway video, seeing them move, they really come to life. So
When you're deep into fashion, at some point you'll reflect on why it seems we have fewer options now than in the past. We can look at style icons or movie stars of old and wonder if we just wear fewer types of garments now. Marie Adam-Leenaerdt seems to have noticed this as well. In her show notes, she talks about walking in public and seeing a sea of t-shirts and sweatshirts, just everything made of jersey. Jersey is a type of weave that everybody's familiar with. Just anything that's stretchy like this, like t-shirt, sweatshirt, kind of stretchy, that's just all jersey. It's kind of weird how much of our sartorial comfort zone could be summarized just as jersey. Leenaerdt gives the people what they want in this situation, seemingly out of frustration. She'll send out a jersey trench coat. Trenches are almost entirely done in a gabardine or a twill, which kind of look like this. I have never in my life seen a jersey trench coat. We also have a jersey, this thing. I think it's like an extra sleeve that can be used as a built-in jersey stole or scarf. And even this jersey piece that's meant to elongate the torso into like kind of an elegant but unhuman proportion. The jersey here supports the idea in a way that I can't quite put my finger on. The drop waist swag wouldn't give the same disturbing but beautiful feel if it was just done up in a silk twill, for example. I just used the words inhuman and disturbing during a runway analysis, which I think can be pretty hot button words. And I only use those words because, firstly, I think that they are true, and secondly, I think that was Miss Leanert's intention for these looks. But thirdly, I use those words to refer to Marie's time as a designer at Balenciaga under Demna, a luxury brand that could almost entirely be described as elegantly disturbing. The side of Marie Adam-Leenaerdt that I like best is, surprisingly for me, not the runway looks, but rather her actual product. For me, this is the side of her design language that is most clearly dialed in. A structured neck on a bodysuit. A beautifully reflective skirt. I would love to see this thing in movement in person. Also, these insane cape tops are a workplace power move. And her classic calling card of blazers where the lapels are splashing into each other. Beautiful stuff. I always say that designers need 4 full runway shows to establish the foundation of their design language, and then on the 5th, we get to really see who they are. For Marie Adam-Leenaerdt, this is show number 4. She had 1 off-calendar show, and then 3 on-calendar shows in the Paris calendar, which I can proudly say we have attended all 3. Get excited. Those 6 months are going to pass quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the lightning round, the round where everything is lightning quick and we review a bunch of shows very fast. The Vaquera duo is improving season over season. We're finally starting to see how their ironic sensibility can create product. We all may know that bubble skirts are on the rise right now, but when executed in the Vaquera universe, they take on this ultra-dramatic shape that reminds me of their best-selling dress that they brought back for Look 27. They understand their positioning, taking inspiration from Gaultier, Versace, and the whack-ass ephemera that occupies our daily lives. The monogrammed Vaquera caps felt ultra-playful and maintained the rough-around-the-edges part of the brand that I would hate to see toned down in light of them making more commercial product. Issey Miyake alumni Yasuke Takahashi has taken his brand CFCL to a new place. It stands for Clothing for Contemporary Life. And that seems like a great name for his clothes, a lot of which are machine washable, which is a huge win for everybody. This layered, colorful dress is eye-catching and gorgeous for leaving the house, but much of the collection featured cozy, heathered knits that pair with fringy tops, which seemed perfect and approachable to up your style without going too crazy. Flattering and easy. Germanier's over-the-top and meticulous beading work was applied to 24 elaborate looks that all represented the zodiac and the planets this season. Kevin Germanier's efforts towards sourcing and utilizing only upcycled materials is a huge challenge that led him to using reflective tinsel and discarded party decor into looks that will shine where they're meant to, on people dressing for large-scale events and those who are meant to be photographed. These clothes are the best way for stylists to get all eyes on their client. You literally cannot miss them in these clothes. The fantastical vision of Kunihiko Morinaga is alive and well at Anrealage. After showing on the Tokyo Fashion Week calendar this year, Mr. Morinaga returned to Paris to showcase his new inflatable clothing, which have been blown up live in front of the audience to cheers and applause. There's a lot of cheers and applause at Anrealage shows. They're really fun. According to Morinaga, this has been a well-known invention in Japan for years. In his eyes, however, a small fan fitted into the clothing enables Morinaga to take what is a staple of park characters and certain type of amusement park costumes and propose a reality in which these bulbous looks could be seen as reasonable. Morinaga excels at bringing ideas that seem too unapproachable for fashion and delivers these bonkers ideas. These clothes aren't illusions or arts and crafts. These are wacky but genuine proposals for a future Mr. Morinaga sees as a possibility. Mr. Jun Takahashi is diving into women's formal wear this season. That was the big single takeaway from these corseted and zipped bodice gowns finished with golden touches in fuchsia, white, and black. These ideas were adapted into the more wearable garments of the collection, like t-shirts and skirts, which adopted the styling and themes of the last menswear show, which was inspired by the band Glass Beams. My single favorite part of this collection are the ways in which different fabrics were fused together, possibly felted together, creating these beautiful transitions across the waist and sleeves and between knits and jersey and cotton and wool. Finishings galore dotted the various dresses, skirts, and zip-up hoodies. The graphics, as always, were beautiful, with crisp depictions of lemons on breezier garments as well as abstracted Rothko-like prints that were found on others. Maria Boyarovskaya and her partner Artem have been attempting to find a new expression for minimalism. Boyarovskaya exercises a great deal of restraint in their designs. Despite what this trench might imply, most of their women's wear finds small details that make the biggest possible impact when they are on your body. This is one of only a few brands that should be tried on rather than looked at. If they're carried anywhere near you, you should absolutely go pick out a few things and give them a try. Vivienne Tam has been a fashion designer longer than I've been alive. And this season, she continues her exploration of how her Chinese heritage intersects with her life in the West. Adorning her clothes were traditional and intricate patterns called Li brocade, which is this beautiful symbolic heritage of the indigenous Li people of Hainan Island in China. This relic of the Chinese cotton industry has been passed down through generations and is very respectfully rendered in a color palette reflective of their culture: ginger, indigo, red cabbage, purple. Thank you for joining us in the lightning round, where we lightning fastly go through things really fast. There's a lot more stuff. Stay tuned. We kind of had to run to Yohji Yamamoto. This ended up being the craziest part of the entire week. Pouring rain, no train access, no Ubers available. This is one of the kind of challenging things about Fashion Week for people who aren't celebrities. You're jet lagged, you're dealing with frantic transportation and, at least in our case, an overbooked schedule. And then as best you can, you have to take all logistical things and mentally tuck them away and be present for the 15 minutes that the show is happening. Fortunately, when I step inside the Hotel de Ville in Paris, the same place that Yohji usually hosts his women's wear shows, it's hard to feel frustrated. The staff is warm and calm. The building is breathtakingly beautiful. It's that classic Renaissance revival style that Americans just go crazy for. It's the opposite of our hyper-practical sensibilities. This season featured a live piano performance by Pavel Kolesnikov, who actually seems to be a fashion guy. And hearing the live instrumentation was a great addition. Live instruments can never be as loud as recorded music booming through a speaker, but the lower volume brought an added hush over the crowd. Yohji's clothes are challenging. Challenging. Fashion people love this word. I think that challenging means that somewhere in the collection, there's a rogue element that requires your focus and attention in order to, understand it. Like, if the fashion standard is pretty lady, pretty location, pretty dress, then challenging collections will disrupt that normal in some way. Often, challenging collections try to confront you, the viewer, about the nature of beauty. Like, why couldn't this be beautiful as well? Or like a challenging collection might say to you, what if a dress was beautiful in the same way that this building is beautiful? Like, does that make sense? Challenging clothes are just sort of meant to shake you up and lead you down a thought process that's not typical when you're simply looking at clothes. There's no rules attached to challenging collections, but a common theme is that almost all challenging collections do not immediately appear to just be, wow, so gorgeous. But Yohji's clothes are gorgeous. Like, before I can start overanalyzing what I'm seeing, my lizard brain lights up with that wow feeling. I get blown away immediately. And again, for challenging clothes, your reward usually comes at the end of the process. Like, you follow the challenge, you think a little bit, and then you walk away enriched by your own dialogue with that collection. But with Yamamoto-san, the thinking really is optional. The dialogue is secondary. But all that's true of Yohji's work generally. Today, we're here to talk about Spring 25 women's wear, and there is some great stuff to unpack. I often think about Yohji's inspiration of August Sander, who was a German photographer working in the early 20th century. Sander photographed a lot of just regular people at work. And there's this rawness to a lot of his photographs that I feel like would be very difficult to replicate here in 2024. But I want to be really specific about what I mean by rawness. Let's look at this photo in particular. Look at his face. This man has experienced hardship that I know that I do not personally have any reference for. This guy has experienced cold in a way that I will never understand. I do not think that I could see a face like this if I looked at a million faces here in the present. When we say that these photos are the inspiration, I don't think that means imitating the exact angle of the collar or the button width or the hem length. It's finding ways of speaking through clothes that might pay tribute to the lives and experiences of these people from the past. I think that this dress looks like beautiful hair that hasn't been brushed in a long time. It's matted, and it is greasy, and it's beautiful. This look is a great example of what sets this collection apart. When I see many of these ensembles, I wonder how they're even held together. Look 12, for example, looks like the design team selected a few fabrics they wanted to use, and instead of sewing them to the dress, they twisted them into shape over the model's body. Almost like the inverse of draping, or a hypothetical world where the twisting techniques that you might use for baby wearing are expounded out into a whole tradition of dress. Yohji's team is absolutely equipped to execute kickflips of pattern cutting, and they usually do, but this season, they seem to be trying to execute these dresses such that they come off as physically impossible. A few looks appear to exist as adornment first, like they don't seem to have a core structure. It's almost like you took a bunch of bits of fabric from off the floor and then threw them up in front of a naked model. You snapped a picture right as all the pieces were just kind of like flowing in front of the model's body, and then you took that photograph and said, make the dress like this. Then, of course, we have some ideas that fit neatly into the Yohji that all of us are familiar with. Look 8 almost appears to have mold growing in a few areas of the lace. And I always want to be transparent when I can't make sense of something. This show was mostly a monochromatic palette with a shake-up at the end. 5 dresses emerged, all bright red, each one cut differently. The veils that used to be white for the styling earlier in the show are now black. These red ensembles stood together to conclude the show. There was no final flood. It could be just a visually striking way to end the show and emphasize some of the more commercial dresses, and that would make sense. Ultra-commercial stuff is a rare sighting at a Yohji show. The thing that makes me pause is the little uses of red throughout the rest of the show. Look 35 features one red glove, for example, covered in bits of what seems to be seconds of black leather. Those same black leather swatches seem to be hidden throughout a few models' hair as well. Additionally, the first couple looks feature a length of red ribbon. In look 2, the ribbon helps to show the complexity of the pattern cutting. You can more appreciate how many ins and outs there are with the dress with this flash of red zigzagging through it all. These other little Easter eggs make me think that there's something here beyond just pretty bright red dresses at the end. Elements like the red motif help keep me grounded, reminding me that my most useful tool for looking at Yohji runway collections is my lizard brain. Posh Spice has been a businesswoman for many years at this point, and a lot of women of her stature will attempt, some sort of brand at some point or another. Unlike many of those other brands, however, Victoria Beckham is in it for the long haul. This is what she does. Again, no shade to VB, but I can't help but think of celebrity women with failed shoe lines or brands that just kind of sell overpriced garbage, like Sarah Jessica Parker, Jessica Simpson. Honestly, it's not even a women's celebrity thing. Pete Wentz and the guy from Blink-182 have done this. And women consumers are often lured into these women's celebrity lines, but not for the reasons that you'd think. I think a lot of women just assume that if anyone on earth knows the most comfortable heels to wear, the best way to style a dress, how to choose what earrings to wear, common sense has it that someone who has walked a dozen or so red carpets may really have something to show you about that experience. Women are familiar with Victoria Beckham, and I think there are a few things about what she's doing here that deserve some attention and fundamentally do separate her from most other celebrity-turned-designer counterparts. Most working designers have a trusted CEO in their pocket on whom they depend, and recently, VB's CEO, named Marie LeBlanc, departed after getting the brand into a profitable place and after integrating the VB brand at Paris Fashion Week. We learned that via WWD. These are huge milestones for a fashion business. Beckham first began showing in New York, making her way over to the prestigious Paris fashion scene over time. Victoria Beckham is also a see now, buy now business, a model that's known for being really demanding of the designers specifically. Knowing that, you see these molded, ethereal bustiers and learn that they're going to be producing them as product. And then you start to pay attention. These bustiers are awesome. They can stand in the same lineage of molded bustiers with Schiaparelli, Balmain, Issey Miyake, Tom Ford, and any other hallmark molded bustier out there. They aren't out yet. However, via Vogue, we learned that the green dress Gigi Hadid wore in the show is already out and available for purchase. We checked and it is. Victoria Beckham cares about what she makes, and the women who seem to trust her are seeing her deliver on that now more than ever. Her runway shows demonstrate that she's focused on delivering the promise of a seasonal collection, and I found myself pleased with a lot of the experimental portions. I would be thrilled to see these pants come out of any brand, especially when you consider that this is Victoria Beckham's proposal for posh, well-kept women. When viewed through that lens, these are pretty extreme proposals. It has been a long climb to profitability. Victoria Beckham started that brand in 2008 and is only now seeing the success that she had hoped for. To reiterate, a household name celebrity started a brand and it took her 15 fucking years to overcome the gargantuan fashion industry obstacles between where you start and being profitable. If you are a young fashion designer, I just want you to think about that a lot. There are no shortcuts, not even for Posh Spice. Despite the fact that her very working class or middle class family did drive her to school in a very regular, normal car. And through that long slog of a process, you still have to make clothes that connect with people. And above all else, that is why we wrote about Victoria Beckham this season. This was a good show. Back in a car and back to Dover Street Market, Paris, which mostly is just the coolest place to shop in the city, but also is an excellent showroom during Fashion Week. The DSM showroom takes in designers that they organically form relationships with and whom they believe can really impact the wider industry. One designer has taken our interest for the last year or so, and we weren't going to leave Paris until we had gotten another interview. So I already know, but if you could please say your name again and tell us what you do.
Of course, I'm Valériane, and I'm the creator of the brand Indépendant de Cœur, IDC for short.
Could you talk to me a little bit about what you're doing with this collection? This is number 2?
Number 3. I was able to rework on a concept again, and it's exploring the notion of destruction. The destruction of beauty and some sculptures that were representative of systems. So the pieces actually have systems within them. That was my solution for the problematic. It was to offer a system to the wearer. So the pieces, you can actually style them differently.
It's modular system?
Modular systems, exactly. The same version, and you can just wear the top open here and change the cleavage, so have something very open and it's changing the shape here. If you decide to have a closed neck, you can tie this at the front. Like quite free and playful with the pieces. And it's the same with the skirts, so the skirts you can tie them at the front, at the back, or actually because the pattern is essentially a top, so you can wear that. You could completely wear that as a top too.
Something I've always really liked about your work is that it often looks on a body like it's about to fall off. Like, you know, the way a towel, like a man would wear a towel when he comes out of the shower, where it's just kind of like it's on them, but not really. And if they moved around too much, it would just fall off. So like, I often feel like I get that effect from your work, but it is securely real clothes. So it is not falling off, but it kind of has that, like, it looks like it's at risk of kind of doing that. Like, this is a great example of that, where it looks like it's just about to slough off, but in fact, the whole thing is pattern cut to be, just give that illusion without actually doing it.
It's on.
Yeah.
It was also about making pieces that last in time more than usual because, like, to me, offering a different alternative to styling within the clothes makes a piece a bit more like out of trend, but in a good way, you know, because you can just, it evolves with you, and you're
not on the track that's repeating itself and then going away and coming back. You're doing your own thing.
Completely. Yeah, I love to work with antique fabrics, and I go to a lot of antique markets and flea markets in London, which is where I find bed sheets. So this is cotton bed sheets.
Wow.
And you can find here, you've got, I'm trying to keep these beautiful embroidery details. Family embroidery probably.
Oh my god.
That was on the bed sheet.
Crazy.
So, you know, the pattern is the same, but it makes a piece quite unique actually, and I love that.
Christmas comes 4 times a year for Junya Watanabe fans. I don't know how he's able to keep so many shows going with so many collaborations and so much excellent execution. As a designer, Junya Watanabe likes keeping multiple balls in the air at once. A wild amount of variety from collection to collection would be a drawback for most designers. A lot of fashion people prefer consistency and cohesion rather than massive changes every few months. But for Junya's team, the changes are all part of the design language. Much of this show is finding variants on an idea that on this channel we emphasized a few seasons ago, but that Junya has been doing for a long time. This is still one of the best shows that I've ever seen in person. So here in Spring 25, these are different approaches to the same prompt. Manic is not really a word that I would associate with Junya. In my head, he always just kind of exists like this, just, you know, like thinking really hard. But this collection is manic. It's the visual equivalent of eating so much cereal that the roof of your mouth hurts. I remember being in the room for this show, and for these first 10 looks, I was wondering, how did they arrive at this? It feels like it came out of nowhere, and not just like, where did this come from? It's really, really abrasive. But okay, wait, back up. There are actually 3 separate segments to this show, and we need to talk about them generally, and I think at the end of that we can understand Junya's body of work more completely. We got to go a little bit out of order here. There are 30 looks total. We're going to start at look 17, continuing to the end. This is the 3rd section of Spring 25. We have the strongest through line of Junya's women's wear present here. Heavy deconstruction to the point where the term deconstruction doesn't really work anymore. I'm going to call this patchwork deconstruction, taking heavy bits of leather, pleather, hardware, and finishings to make looks that would suit a post-apocalyptic god king. So if you remember 18 months ago, I said that this collection was my favorite that I had ever attended in person. And Spring 25 was the same way with the deconstructed moto patchwork. I connected this show to the current show and wondered when Junya actually started doing all of this. And then by accident, I uncovered one of Junya's main through lines for his whole career. He doesn't do it in every women's wear show, but there's about 14 where this theme is heavily present. Brief history lesson. I put the start of Junya's patchwork deconstruction at fall 2006. This is all military surplus type stuff, but you can see the similarities. It looks like they just dropped a few racks at a surplus store, used a seam ripper to pull all the pattern pieces apart, and then reconnected them as they saw fit. Then, only a year later, they introduced one of Junya's favorite items of clothing, a black motorcycle jacket. There's some playing with the pattern pieces here in some ways, but it's pretty conservative, at least by comparison to where we are now. As we continue through his body of work, the comparisons become a lot more obvious. And eventually this leads us back up to the final half of this current show, looks 17 through 30. The first section of the show, the part that I first called Manic, does have precedent in this lineage as well. These looks seem to be trying to do the same ideas as the deconstructed patchwork, but by using different materials and sometimes getting much messier. From what I saw, it seems like Junya occasionally will take the patchwork deconstruction and then every once in a while he'll take that idea a little too far to kind of see where it ends up. And I believe that's what he's doing here. Fashion designers are essentially paid to be control freaks. I really respect it when they try to navigate uncharted waters. Then there's this little group of outfits in the middle of those two sections. Not really any deconstruction here, but I really enjoyed these outfits. They were the highlight of the show for me. Maximally weird, but surprisingly, and I hate using this word, they seem really wearable. I saw a few longtime customers of the brand in the front row smile really big when these looks walked out in particular. I can't wait to see what these look like out in the wider world.
Zomer, 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 Zomer. Y'all are always asking me what independent new brands should I be paying attention to. This is in our top 5. Zomer. This is their 3rd show. Everything I've seen from them has been completely excellent so far. Daniel and Imru, who are the founders and creative directors, are both very well established in the industry, and they waited to start their brand until they both felt like they were ready to really take it off, and it has taken off.
I often think to myself when I'm looking at Zomer, there is a clear mastery of color and palette at this brand. If I were to break down these looks into a 4 or 5 color palette, you begin to understand how considered and thoughtful the clothing at Zomer actually is. An exciting color palette can unlock an entire collection, and Zomer is trying to stake their claim as color masters in the current fashion landscape. I mean, typically, I hate black with bright colors, but this look makes me question if that take of mine is really all that valid. This is very well balanced. Color is a double-edged sword in fashion. Some brands try to use bright colors and whimsy to distract from middling clothes. Others have their clothing not taken very seriously by the public because of how bright it is. The color palette and vibrancy at Zomer, however, it only enhances their optimistic and playful nature, precisely because they understand how balancing their kaleidoscopic vision with simple and familiar cuts is crucial. It is their restraint on their bursting palette in tactful satin shirts and columnar dresses that adds to their playful universe, perhaps even more effectively than their already advanced understanding of color. As with every serious brand, the execution is really where the magic happens. We make a showroom visit to Zomer every season. The execution is excellent. Their color palette is one thing, and I do seriously love it. But there are more ideas from this dynamic duo that have left me more encouraged than ever about Zomer's place in high fashion. Like, for example, this dress features a printed 2D rendering of a floral as well as a 3D patterned floral applique. While I love how playful it is to experience both a print and a raised applique of the same motif, the beading on both was beautiful. Even from far away, the beading looks so lush and plentiful. And that black, shiny beading found its way onto an entire mini dress, which is such a sleeper hit in this menagerie of looks. And beading found its way onto other various and stunning garments, some of which featured these ostrich feathers as well. It's pretty obvious to Daniela and I that Imru and Daniel have big goals and are looking to impress their audience with every new collection. They seem to be viewing these shows as opportunities to showcase just how extensive their technical capabilities really are. We're left believing that despite their recent addition to the calendar, they're as ready to be showcased as any brand that's been here for decades. Nowhere can you see their technical proficiency more than in the pattern cutting specifically. Gathering is not a particularly difficult technique, but it's not easy to think to use it like this, embellishing and creating a floral-like dimension to these multicolored skirts and this spectacular leather top. Daniel and Imru, if you are watching this, hi guys, you fucking nailed that top. Great work. The pleating, the gathering on this skirt is just fantastic. The way this garment moves is chef's kiss. Balancing the olive and the dark blue with that fuchsia ruffled hat just felt like a stroke of genius. Zomer is here, folks. They take nothing for granted, and they have shown up now time and time again with an arsenal of skills on their back pocket waiting to impress an audience of people who who are wanting to see him win. I cannot wait to see what they think of next. Time now for the brand that's become the hardest to explain to my parents, and also one of my favorite stops of the week, Noir K Nina Mia. So during Women's Week, all of the Comme des Garçons brands are clumped together on the same day. And that's Saturday. Somehow the chaos of everything happening on one day works for them. Enthusiasts refer to this literally on the calendar as Comme Day. And interestingly, Noir K Nina Mia, Junya Watanabe, and Comme des Garçons are handled, like logistically handled, so different than every other brand in Paris, and I want to emphasize that. For every other show, you go up to the entrance where security would stop you.
Invitation only, please.
And a friendly PR with an iPad asks for your name. They confirm that your name is on the list, and they mark it so that they have a record that you did in fact attend the show in person. The iPads specifically are a really crucial part of this, because if you didn't have the iPad and the list of the hundreds of names, these poor PRs who are handling multiple shows per day would have to literally memorize thousands of names and the faces that go with them in order to do their job at the door correctly. Okay, at CDG events, at Noir, at Junya, and at Comme, there are no iPads. There is no external PR company managing the door for them. At the door for each show stands a small group of Comme des Garçons PR employees who smile and greet every guest individually by name. At our very first show with them years ago, which was a Noir K Nina Mia show, we walked up to the door and a PR smiled and calmly asked if we had an invitation, because that specific PR didn't recognize us. And before we could even answer, a PR that we had only emailed with, we had never even spoken on the phone, emerged and said, "Bliss, Daniela, hi, welcome, please come with me." There's a lot of discussion in Paris about the mechanics of luxury, like what real luxury is. I don't know if I can contribute to that conversation very much, but I know with certainty that as far as the entrance experience to these shows is concerned, Comme des Garçons brands have the most luxurious experience in Paris. It is deeply impressive. Anyway, a massive part of appreciating any designer's work is to try and understand their design language, what their design identity is. What color palette do they like using? Does the designer have an affinity for straight lines and right angles? Is everything they make just a variation on outfits their mother used to wear? Understanding the designer's own language is crucial to experiencing their art holistically. If I start reading a novel and expecting it to be a haiku, I'm gonna have a bad time. Further, if I read a free verse poem like a haiku, it's the same result. And even if I read two different haikus by two different poets and treat them the same way, you get the point. K Nina Mia's design language is really difficult to pin down. The clothes, the music, the individual pieces all feel more like a beautifully coordinated fireworks show than a runway collection. And that effect is great. K is good at his job. This season, we're going to briefly outline his design language so that we can all still experience that fireworks show and appreciate the mechanics. Examining art closely doesn't ruin it, folks. It makes it better. This is a listicle. 1. Use of darkness and light. Most runways use this because it's a fundamental tool of theater. You know, like if it's super dark and then the lights all come up, it sets a certain emotional tone. Then if the lights slowly come up, or if there's complete darkness, then only a spotlight. But instead of using light as an environmental or a supportive element, NKN uses it as part of the collection itself. This time we literally had glowing looks. And in the past, for example, we've had pieces with no electricity at all that were simply reflecting light onto the walls and floor to kind of announce itself before it even entered the room. Number 2, juxtaposition. Sorry to transform into your high school English teacher, but have you read the poem The Emperor of Ice Cream? It's a great Wallace Stevens poem that kind of shows the effects of putting something super serious next to something whimsical. The Emperor of Ice Cream. Ever since the 90s, runway shows have taken on this general air of moody seriousness. Noir K Nina Mia keeps that ultra moody tone, and then they play with that tone by introducing, pardon my simplicity here, they play with that moody tone with silly stuff. The model is still dreadfully serious, but there's this little kettle upside down on their head, a la Over the Garden Wall. The result is neither serious nor silly, just that those two elements together make some new emotional sandwich. Number 3, repetition. The use of a single motif a lot, like belts. Lots of big belts used for various purposes, usually not normal belt purposes. But even in looking at an ensemble, you'll often find like a rat king of belts somewhere. Many little roses all over the place is used in this season in particular. Like here we see a bunch of little Venus flytrap looking things mushed together. Typically, if a fashion designer was referencing a Venus flytrap, they would do like a big old print on a t-shirt or make a single Venus flytrap sort of skirt looking something. It would usually just be the object in isolation. Like, okay, for example, if I say tree, the thing that pops into most people's head is this. It's just a single tree, right? That doesn't exist in nature. If you actually look at trees, they're tangled up in an orgy of natural context. Number 4. A great deal of what seems to be ultra-specific work is done in a way where if you glance at it, it looks deceptively flippant. Like when we went to the showroom, so many of these pieces look like they were created with a lot of care. Even if they're, of course, super weird, nothing about this seems rushed or flippantly built. But when you back up, the piece kind of tricks you into thinking it's simpler than it really is. This is common across all of Kay's work. Number 5, we've discussed this many times, but a core part of Kay's work is not using traditional sewing techniques for runway pieces. So they would instead make the end pieces out of plastic and fuse them together. They've used systems of chain links to attach pieces before. Sometimes it's literally just small linked rope. Number 6, another point, I'm just going to call these suspenders because I don't really know what to call them. It's almost like he's turned a sandwich board into a type of garment. These can be as small as this piece where it's almost like just a little accessory that could go on top of any outfit, or something that's a little bit more substantial, all the way up to suspenders holding together a large piece with a ton of volume. But yeah, a lot of these pieces require this suspenders sandwich board-like construction. So in closing here, this isn't a house code, it's more just kind of a way that can help us as outsiders better view this work. If you took Family Guy, for example, and tried to recreate it in live action, what would that look like? It's likely that Family Guy just couldn't function unless it's a cartoon. I mean, people get beheaded, horses talk, the weather will change in an instant and with comedic timing. You maybe could do all of that stuff with real people and practical effects, but it would not come out the same, and it probably wouldn't be very funny. Noirke ni Namiya is attempting to make a cartoon live action. Not literally, you understand. But if you took some of the wackier touchstones of animation history and tried to find out what they would wear in a live action remake, you start to kind of understand the challenge that Kay has set up for himself and his team. They're bringing into reality the clothing ideas and the characters that can only truly, really exist in our imaginations. Kay has set an impossible goal and is spending his career trying to solve it. Sounds like another great designer that we cover. This is a little bit unusual for us, but we split up our appointment with Peter Do between 2 days. One was a couple days before his runway so that we could walk the showroom space and speak with Peter and his wonderful partner about the collection. The second one was show day, near the end of the week. This is when most of the Paris Fashion Week attendees start saying things like, "I'm all fashioned out." Fortunately, Peter's show took place in a gorgeous museum with one of the most winding and long runways of the entire week. It was easy to be attentive here. Peter Do continues to evolve. One reason I admire Pete so much is that he fell victim to and then survived the fashion industry kiss of death. The signature style that Peter started with, that ultra-futuristic, mega sleek look, was essentially stolen by fast fashion companies like Zara and H&M, and then became so saturated that it became a trend. And then, of course, once something is a trend, it goes out of trend. This is the kiss of death in fashion. A big shitty company takes your idea and then milks it and leaves it. But Peter adapted. As his work at Helmut Lang is beginning to level out, and we're beginning to see the vision there more clearly, the Peter Do brand is in that magic place of transformation right now. The first reptiles are emerging from the primordial soup. The Peter Do brand from the first 3 seasons before you went to Helmut, not 3, but the few collections before you went to Helmut Lang, You had that super distinctive look that we were talking about earlier, and then you got hired by Helmet. And then it seems like that look, the PD look, kind of got carried into Helmet because they were like hiring you because all over the internet for years people were like, oh my gosh, he should be at Helmet Lang. But and they finally listened to the internet, which we're all very relieved about. And then it seems like you kind of gave that aesthetic over to Helmet Lang, and then you've kind of been like out in new waters with your own brand. Has that been scary?
I mean, Helmet was one of my favorite brands, and he was one of my heroes.
I mean, it's everyone's favorite brand. It's incredible.
It's a lot of times like there's so many things from Pete, and this got, you know, Helmet go through so many different changes. But when I started PD, there was so many things from Helmet that sort of like inspired my own brand. And I think that's like the challenge, right? When I come now that I'm at Helmet, I feel like what needs to come home and what need to evolve from PD, because I'm also a different person now as well. When I started the brand, I was 26. So now I feel like a different person, and I want, maybe that's like a reaction from being a Helmet and then designing like 8 more collections a year, 4 more men's, 4 more women's. That maybe that's why I feel like for my own brand, I want it to feel even more personal and even more poetic and even more quiet than the other ones, because we're only doing 2 collections a year, and a lot of the product I want it to be forever product. I don't know, I feel like maybe that's just like the reaction from like producing so much work, that I want my own work to feels like not so loud. I don't know, I like whispering. I like that kind of cultivating, speaking to our customer, and that's sort of like what I want to do. More apparel and less fashion with a capital F, I feel.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit within this brand specifically how you got from where you started and what everyone first knew you for to this?
Like over the years, past 6 years, I got really good, or better at editing myself of like, this is what I want to say. This is the pants that I love, that I would love to wear. This is the shirt you can wear 10 different ways, so you just need one shirt. Because I mean, we have a very clear idea of like the 3 tiers that we're doing. So the first tier is what we call 168, which is the number of hours in a week. Because it's meant to be something that you can wear every single day, and it's meant to be completely, for the first time we can do unisex, sort of like gender fluid, everything's modular, easy care, things like that. Because so far, when we have one big collection in the past, and we're like, okay, we're like unisex with all of these things, I feel like people have not caught up to like what men's and women would like to wear. And this is the only collection that has the tattoo line.
Okay, cool.
But that's like the logo of the brand.
Is it? Okay, You think of that as your logo
Yeah.
product. Very cool. Well, I came out and it was the partially sheer.
That's so sick.
Yeah, that's cool.
So that's like the logo of the brand. People know us by that, but
Man, that is a beautifully subtle way to have a little mark. That's
you.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
So
just-
what are the other tiers? 168 and then what else?
and then this is the seasonal product. So twice a year we have a new offering. That's like an evolve, and this is like, you know, made in Asia. This is made in New York and Italy, and then the third tier is this product, which is like artisanal, kind of like the top. So all of this fabric was hand dyed by 3 different artisans, villages in Thailand, using ancient mud, tree barks, olives, super sustainable. It's the mud they use to dye monks' clothes. So took us 6 months, all the logistic, ship back and forth, develop the fabric in Turkey and Italy, ship to Thailand, go to 3 different villages, indigo dyeing first, tree barks on top, mud dye on top. So that's like the top of the top that I don't even know we can produce, because we're so small, so I don't really know we have the capability to even like produce that kind of garment. But it's more of like a storytelling for the brand of like showing people that there are different places in the world that can produce this level of craftsmanship that's not just Italy or Paris or New York.
Definitely, yeah. There are a few wells that fashion designers continuously return back to for inspiration. Goth culture in the 90s, teddy boys in the 50s are referenced all the time. Another huge one is matadors and bullfighting culture generally. We can see that in the beautifully adorned ensembles throughout Luis de Javier's show. Throughout the looks, you can see how Luis does a great job of balancing his own imagination with that core historic inspiration. And just to tread back onto it, bullfighting and matadors have been referenced by fashion designers a lot. Like John Galliano literally repped the set one time on the runway himself. Cristobal Balenciaga has made direct reference to bullfighting, and those are just the Spanish designers. I'm not launching into a full history lesson here, but there is some context that we need to give in order to give Javier his full flowers on this. Runway shows used to not suck, but they were really different a few decades ago. I'm generalizing, but many runway shows used to be much more theme-oriented. Yves Saint Laurent, the man, would, visit China, and then we would have the China collection. And even if we ignore the kind of dicey racial parts of that, we still have a show that feels kind of ham-fisted and dumb. Like, Yves' talent is unquestionable, but with shows like this, it often feels like the whole thing would be better if he and his atelier had just focused on technique and shape rather than doing a great job with technique and shape and then slapping some chopsticks on at the end. And that's one of the biggest changes from fashion in the 1970s and 80s to now. You're not meant to describe runway shows with a single phrase now. Okay, de Javier's show was using a heavy theme, but it was done in a really smart way. Spanish designer referencing his own country's culture, fair enough. De Javier also explores what I consider to be the most interesting part of bullfighting culture, which is this interesting take on gender. There's this great interview with Vice with Antonio Lopez Fuentes, who's a tailor that services bullfighters specifically. They're discussing the origins of modern bullfighting clothes. Quote, "They dress them like women, but still manage to make them look manly. And today, you can dress a woman in a traje de luces and she'll still look masculine to you, regardless of how big her ass is." End quote. So it's almost like de Javier saw that interview and said, "Oh, bitch, watch me." These ensembles do look beautifully feminine, and the adornment work on them is a great play on the official bullfighting garb. Starting this conversation in an early runway show is a great way for LDJ to open up a theme that he could explore for a whole decade if he really wanted to. He's apparently one of the few designers that we can trust with a thematic show. A completely new era. It's time for Valentino under Alessandro Michele. This actually seems like a fairly good fit for him, but as always, we'll find out, and we will not go over the top trying to figure out what's going to happen in the future based off of one show, because that would be ridiculous. I've always said that designers need a minimum of 4 collections, 4 like spring, summer, fall, winter type collections in order to really build the groundwork. And then on the 5th collection, you can start saying like, now we kind of understand the voice. But for the first 4, I tend to just kind of let them breathe and sort of look at what kind of groundwork they're trying to build. Alessandro Michele is the designer of the internet era. His design language is the embodiment of a 20-something who's deeply interested in everything such that they can't decide on a career path, so they apply for an MFA program in the puppetry arts and costume technology. His collections are the physical manifestation of the final match of the World Wiki Race Championships. You must get from Mandarin Duck to Depression Glass in 8 moves. We have a lot to cover here. I'm going to talk fast. Everyone needs to lock in. We are going to talk about the clothes in this show, but we need to talk about the symbolism in the setting first. The entire room was filled with old furniture and miscellaneous items covered in white sheets. This was meant to give the room the feeling of an old attic, the place where you might go exploring alone when you're visiting grandma and find a chest filled with old clothes that you try on and look at in the mirror. Importantly, the floor here is based on an art piece called Passi by Alfredo Piri. Piri also installed the floor at the Valentino show. For our purposes here, Piri lays mirrors all over the floor and breaks them in just such a way. As you walk, you get a warped reflection because of the cracks, and you can hear the glass continue to crack and shift under your feet. Besides being a great little visual detail, Alessandro is making his intentions for this new appointment clear. Mr. Michele is a big fan of critical theory, and he's usually chewing on one of the more denser texts while he's working on a show. For this collection, we're going to be talking about an essay by Jacques Lacan called The Mirror Stage. While we talk about that, I'm going to show you clothes so you can get some context in your head. Okay, so the psychoanalyst idea here is that an infant child, about 6 months old, sees themselves in a mirror and a crucial part of their development happens. They look and they recognize that they are looking at themselves for the first time. According to Lacan, after seeing in the mirror, the I, the self, becomes something that is now outside of you. Right? So a little bit confusing. When a child is very young, the first time that they look in a mirror and go, oh shit, that's me, that's a crucial moment in their development. Not scientifically true, but it was theorized, according to Lacan, that then you develop the self outside of yourself. And then dangerously, you start to develop an ideal self. The ideal self is, I'm so beautiful, or I'm so organized, or I never confuse my words in an important situation. The ideal self is always about the way that we should be, and it creates a lot of problems because it doesn't always reflect reality. So things like, I'm so beautiful, unfortunately after the mirror stage becomes, I should be thinner, why are the bags under my eyes so big, etc. Everyone has experienced this, right? Like when we expect ourselves to be a certain way, but we fall short of that image and now we're angry at ourselves. Alessandro himself, a few years ago, has talked in interviews about feeling personally insecure when taking selfies with fans. That experience of looking at a selfie that you take with friends and then wincing a little bit when you see how you look in it. Literally everyone on earth has experienced this. A darker side of that insecurity is the common practice of avoiding mirrors, being so exhausted from the cognitive dissonance of your ideal self and your real self that you just avoid looking at mirrors altogether. I do think I understand the scenario here. You're visiting your great aunt's house. You venture up to the attic. You find a chest of drawers full of her old clothes. You play a little bit of dress up for fun. But instead of a standard mirror, you're using this, a cracked mirror. In that moment of trying on the clothes alone in the attic, you have the potential to catch a glimpse of what you could be. The ideal self, of course, is a reality that's only in the future, if the ideal self is real at all. But the cracks in the mirror don't let you get caught up in that illusion. If the mirror is whole, you could look and get confused saying, oh, that's me. But the cracks remind us that that isn't me. That is a mirror. I'm me. And the me goes much further than my jawline. The cracked mirrors are visually beautiful, of course. They add visual interest to the runway space, but they kind of function like as if you're watching a really scary movie like on your phone screen. It's like the movie can be as scary as it wants, but the phone itself is kind of not allowing me to get lost in the world of the movie because it's just my fucking phone. Alessandro has explored this idea of you being much more than a list of checked identity boxes before, specifically in his stellar Fall 2018 show at Gucci, the one with the severed heads and the dragon and stuff. He was exploring the same ideas through the lens of a text called the Cyborg Manifesto. It was one of the earliest analyses I ever made on this channel, actually. Alessandro has explored this idea before, and I think his overall message to us is go crazy. Try things on that you would never be caught dead in. Who cares? You are not the shirt that you have on, so treat it like food. Variety is fun. Alessandro carries this charge out himself, even when he's in casual clothes. He seems to be running identity demos through his accessories. Have you seen the big stacks of bracelets he wears?
Yes.
It's always different and it's always really cool. If you're looking for some kind of summary of my thoughts, it's this. The new Valentino collection is exactly what we wanted from Michele. It's clearly the same brain doing mega maximalism, and we're back at full throttle. If you never liked Michele's work in the past, I do not know how to help you. But for those who, like me, think he's a crucial part of the contemporary fashion landscape, he's back, baby. But why is he crucial? He's a risk taker. He's the ADHD kid in the class who will not follow instructions, but he's so good that he still gets good marks. I don't think it's a stretch to say that looking at Michele shows is to say objectively that there are too many ideas here. That's why it works. All of our current great designers, people like Rick Owens, Miss Prada, Demna, Jonathan Anderson, all of them are famous because they have such a cohesive design language. And right now we're in a time of a lot of conservatism with design languages. Like if a change is going to happen, you want to do it very slowly and carefully over time. Nothing wrong with that. I usually just prefer that method. Michele, by contrast, seems reckless. The new Valentino, and Michele's work at large, is a place to play dress up. And even a place where Alessandro might be inviting you to go beyond dress up and begin gently playing with your own identity. And that would partly be to uncover previously unknown sides of ourselves, partly to see the common elements that bind everyone together as fellow human beings, and partly because it's just fun. In case anybody forgot, the big start to Michele's time at Valentino will be couture, and that comes this January, and I am unbelievably excited for it. Like, if these are the offerings for ready to wear, I want to see some fucking Alta Moda, baby. I am ready. So Daniela and I, when we went to Paris this time, came across a huge selection of Sacai at the new Dover Street Market, Paris. And it's so interesting to see it all lined up together like that. It looks like an Army-Navy surplus store. Lots of khaki, lots of navy blue, some army green, nylon bombers, you get the idea. But when Sacai is styled for the runway, it takes on such a beautiful and feminine air with their unique hybridized and grafted clothes that are unlike anything else in the industry. How crazy is it that those clothes can look simultaneously rugged and utilitarian on a rack, and then so graceful and elegant when worn? There's a lot of this kind of juxtaposition in Chitose Abe's Sacai. This season, her deconstructed and spliced traditional garments are honing in on, among other things, the shoulder, where coat and suit shoulders leap away from the body and create a decorative ruffling that, in their position, remind me of long styled hair. It's like you peeled the shoulder off your jacket and then like hit it with a curling iron before leaving the house.
That is not how you hit something with a curling iron.
What?
Just twist.
Twist. Okay. It's like you peeled the shoulder off your jacket and then like hit it with a curling iron before leaving the house. And while hair isn't necessarily a theme in this collection, this furry, hairy texture added the right amount of playful to the more purpose-driven fabric choices at Sacai this season. I think she's trying to create embellishments out of more practical or even technical materials. The public's affinity for technical fabrics is growing as we see how useful the applications can get. I think that when technical fabrics are wielded correctly by designers, they can, for a moment, make everyone experience some optimism about the state of fashion and where it's headed. That while the shitification of everything occurs everywhere around us, we are still innovating in ways that make us proud. Sacai always makes me feel optimistic in this way. Take this raincoat jumpsuit with curled mesh shoulders. This jumpsuit is making waterproof fabric look so good, the fabric should be paying them royalties. This undeniably feminine looking outfit maintains this overly practical and utilitarian spirit, which is what I think makes Sacai so appealing to so many women. Sacai makes it where women don't have to reject utility in order to appear feminine. Chitose has struck that balance and has found infinite ways of retooling familiar clothing elements to all of us in order to achieve it. She even finds the elegance in more utilitarian items. The carabiner clip bangles are cheeky, but they're also pretty elegant. Familiar clothing elements are crucial to the Sacai look. It's not like pinstripes and white cotton poplin and black wool aren't super adaptable. It's just that before Sacai, you've never seen them adapted like this. This is a pinstriped wool ruffled skirt. This is a leopard print dress parka. These are waiter style kitten boots with an elastic cord stopper. If I said those descriptions to you and then just asked you to come up with what they look like, there is no way you would come up with anything that looks good. Leopard print dress parka does not sound like it will end up looking like this. And that's where I see Miss Abe's magic most clearly. Sacai's one-of-a-kind ethos is found in looking at all the places where others are not looking. She's not reinterpreting the classics. She is not modernizing the classics, and she's not classicifying the moderns. Abe is using familiar key features and elements to create something entirely new. And when you step back and see the final result, Sacai only reinforces to me that we will never run out of ideas in fashion. Even among the most commonplace clothes, there is still so much yet to be discovered. Chitose Abe shows us that season after season. Okay, last thing, real quick. Did you know that Chitose Abe came up with the idea for Sacai while on maternity leave? Like, you try to have an idea that good right after having a baby. Not possible. There's an interesting situation with Rokh Wang. He's a classically trained tailor who's now a fashion designer. Tailors are not always fashion designers, and fashion designers are certainly not always tailors, but there is a good bit of overlap. In his newest show, Rokh seems to be challenging himself to move away from work that might imply that he is merely a tailor. Merely a tailor. Fashion designers and tailors have an interesting relationship. Fashion designers often view tailoring as a small part of their larger body of work. Like, tailoring might be a theme that the fashion designer emphasizes in one collection, and then, they barely think about the tailoring the next collection. Additionally, fashion designers can often, without meaning to, sort of talk about tailors as if they're technicians. Sort of like the way that a band at a music festival might talk about these guys. It's like, they're nice dudes, but, they don't have the creativity to do what I'm doing up here. Even tailors that have put in the work to develop a very complete vision, people like Mr. Schiafanelli, fashion designers often look at this and say, that's not very creative. Tailors have the inverse view and are usually more vocal about it. They often think that fashion designers are kind of all vibes and don't have any technical abilities that would allow them to execute on their ideas. Tailors are also very quick to mock the tailoring work of fashion designers. Both of these views are, of course, overgeneralizations. There are plenty of fashion designers who wield tailoring shears with the best of them, and there are plenty of tailors who command a creative vision. I think Rokh understands this conflict, and I think he kind of likes it. For much of his career, he's designed with that conflict in mind. You can see many of these looks feel like they came from a tailoring student who maybe felt a bit held back by his sartorial mentors. Instead of breaking free from tailoring and pursuing only capital F fashion, Rokh allows those two sides of himself to fight a little. We see some tailoring pieces that are mostly tailoring with some light deconstruction added onto them. We have some pieces that are fully in what the French fashion tradition would call flou and have no semblance of tailoring at all. And then there are these wonderful looks where you can clearly see Rokh letting those two sides of himself fight. This is the best example in the show. Beautiful piece. The flou at the bottom of the coat and the shoulder together end up being the most balanced and compelling ensembles in the whole collection. So much of our lives has been split into the dichotomy of natural and artificial. And even if that's an oversimplification, we can see so much of the natural kind of shrinking in our lives in favor of the artificial. Even if we ignore the climate crisis, what do you do at night for fun? Would it happen to involve a screen? Oh, but wait, I have natural hobbies, you might say. I go to the gym, which is an air-conditioned building wherein I watch videos on my phone the entire time. Oh, and I hike on trails that were made and maintained using heavy machinery. The truth is that people love artifice. We always have. Humans have been questioning the relationship between artificial and natural forever. And for many fashion brands, that dichotomy would feel a little ham-fisted, but for Julius Jewell at Helliot Emile, it does make a lot of sense. The brand's aesthetic leans heavily on fetishizing artifice. They refer to this as industrial elegance. And none of this seems to be an act. Julius himself loves artifice. He's ultra into shaping his own body through what from the outside seems like a fucking crazy workout routine. We've interviewed Julius before where he's wearing a custom mold cast of his own ear. The dude always wears two watches. One is the first ever battery powered Rolex. The other is an Apple Watch. And what the fuck is that? Is that a second pedometer? What do you need a second pedometer for? This man is insane. Not to mention the clothes. Julius loves artificial clothes. Nearly everything from the brand comes in technical fabrics. Julius continues this season to hone his flavor of futuristic, monochromatic layering that uses a lot of harnesses with suiting, some deconstructed puffers, and plenty of melty custom hardware and finishings. And I think this works because every genre of fashion kind of needs its aestheticist. If you need the most honed in, dialed in, specific and practical outdoors gear, REI is 8 keystrokes away at all times. But if you want clothes for windbreaking or heavy rain that have a dialed in point of view, Helliot Emile is the best in the game. Something that I noticed that shook things up with this collection in particular were the questions of artificial versus natural. Before I go any further, I just want to say that as far as the climate emergency is concerned, artificial just means things that the earth won't take back. If I throw a cotton t-shirt on the ground, that shit will be gone in 3 weeks, except for the polyester thread that it's made of. And if you throw just an REI jacket on the ground, it will stay there for hundreds of years. But this show more broadly questioned what the word artificial means. The primary reference was a stellar piece of art by Olafur Eliasson called Riverbed, where the artist moved about 2 tons of Icelandic rock, bringing the natural beauty of his homeland somewhere entirely different. I personally have loved this piece for a long time. I've unfortunately never gotten to experience it in person. Land art fucking rules! The primary tie-in to this collection is a series of rocks that Julius purchased online. Okay, so everyone who attended the show got one of these. This is a actual rock that is itself from Iceland. Julius bought this off of eBay, had it shipped to him, and then gave it to me where it is now in the southern United States. This rock does not belong here. Is this artificial or natural? In a strange shift for that theme, Julius seems to also be incorporating natural fibers into his collection more. And even the textiles that do remain artificial have a lot of nuance to them. Julius seems especially proud of the closer look. He told me that this was a 3D printed textile. I especially enjoyed this smattering of code across the midsection, which seems to have been woven into the textile itself. A few fabrics in this show open up if you zoom in a little bit. Like the penultimate ensemble has this white on white sketch sewn into it. The texture here looks really sick. This earlier look has this kind of crinkle effect to it. We also have a little full circle moment. We did an extended sit-down interview with Julius a few seasons ago where he wore this long sleeve. When I commented on it, Julius mentioned that it was made of cashmere and that it was a prototype they were working on. It was crazy to finally see that pop up on the runway and on his brother. It seems like the brand overall is not trying to abandon technical materials. I think that's a big core of what they do, but they're trying to incorporate more natural textiles into it while maintaining that look, which I think is a fantastic move for that brand. And Demeulemeester seems to have stabilized. This is their third show with their new creative director, Stefano Gallici. This season, the show began with a recreation of a visual and sound installation by contemporary artist Marco Fucinato, who often works in the medium of noise. Noise is a great deal of what made rock what it is, the magic, staticky feedback sound. Gallici enjoys soundtracking his shows with artists like this. He's previously used a minimalist DJ and producer named Augie and an experimental composer, Neuf Voix. Marco, for his part, sat, performed his piece, did a great job, exited, and the show began. I actually haven't had the hairs raised on my neck from guitar music in a long time. It felt nice. Gallici is slowly working to establish his language at the house. Like I always say, it usually takes a designer 4 seasons to lay a foundation, and then we get to see them spread their wings and work. This is like anything else in life. How you come off the block is important, but the actual swimming starts here. So Gallici here in the third show is in the last half of the slipstream from his dive. So what can we see so far? The most noticeable motif is the ribbons. Ribbons are on all but one of a 40-look show. This is a classic Andy motif. It's meant to kind of visually amplify gravity's effects on clothes. Show how things are kind of always tumbling down. This motif is such a strong part of the brand's identity that it was even present in the studio collections back when the brand had no creative director at all. So what is the standout element that separates Gallici's work from previous creative directors? What makes his work different from Ludovic de Saint-Sernin, Sébastien Moulier, and Anne herself? As far as I can tell, it seems to be using mostly monochromatic, mostly sheer fabrics to create an effect like you're wearing a dozen individual items. The ribbons actually bolster this effect a lot. The goal seems to be making everything as busy as possible in a way that leans towards a sexy Interview with a Vampire type look. Ensembles like this and this and this seem to be trying to emulate the disheveled but perfect look of a piece of historic neckwear that's called a stock. That's formal wear from 1780s, 90s, maybe 1800. There's just enough variety in the necks of the models that it makes me think that Gallici got a hold of an old copy of Neckclothitania. Neckclothitania, which is a very old book that just tells you how to tie things around your neck properly. It's also hilariously condescending. It's really, really funny for being a historic book. Outside of the neck thing, there's a few looks where the layering was super successful. This was the closer of the whole evening. I actually like how Gallici pretty seamlessly replaces a shirt with what just seems to be a cape and some well-matched leather pants. I would love to see this type of look expounded upon. Alright, confession. We didn't end up actually making the Uma Wang show because of a scheduling conflict, but we definitely wanted to make our way to her showroom to check out the new work. Uma's brand strongly emphasizes materials. The feeling of the clothes themselves when worn. That's the key to what she does. Which, of course, that feeling is impossible to replicate on a phone screen or any flat screen. When a brand puts their hat in the ring of quality materials, we as the viewer then begin to ask, what point of view does this brand have? Does the brand's hypothetical person spend a lot of time outside? Do they travel? Have they collected so many books that many of those books lie in piles on the floor? This is the typical strategy for fashion brands who emphasize quality. They also emphasize like this certain lifestyle to go along with it. Nothing wrong with that strategy. But this season, Uma tries to solve the core problem, which is how do you make people understand high quality via a phone screen? Her solution is by reaching way back to a period when the people who owned the greatest textiles in the world didn't have to cut them up into a sensible jacket. They just wrapped half a bolt around themselves. Obviously, in images like these, there's a lot of power that they're trying to exude, like, I'm the king of France and don't you fucking forget it, buddy, like that type of energy. But outside of the baggage of monarchy, the fashion industry is based on a very simple sensory experience. I like how this shirt feels on my body. It's simple. I think the moments of this runway show where Uma kind of, maybe, quote, overdoes it, those are the places where she's trying to help us understand these textiles that she has spent so much of her life curating. So like, for example, when we see a huge piece like this, what are we supposed to make of that? I think the shape of this thing was dictated entirely by how it will move. Even if we disregard the more extreme looks and just go to something more subdued like this, we can see Uma showing off the properties of the textile first. When you go to, say, like a fabric website, they'll often twist the fabric so that you can better understand how it behaves from a flat computer screen. I think a lot of that same thinking dictated looks like this, where that little bit of a twist allows us to better understand the hand of the material itself. Miss Wang is finding ways to visually communicate a feeling. Let's briefly listen to what Uma had to say when we visited the showroom.
Like, for example, this one is linen. It's linen. It's very, but we put wax inside to make the shape not fall down. This fabric is very special. Look at the jacket. It's like a sculpture. To make the feeling, the shape, to be more stay. So this for me is really, really. This is my favorite piece. It's also the garment, also the fabric. This is really incredible to working with this. It seems like you are not a fashion designer. You become like an artist to making the sculpture around the woman's body. I really enjoy the process. I start always inspired by art piece. So this collection actually is really inspiration from Brancusi, yeah. So I go crazy because I saw the Pompidou exhibition. I'm really impressed, So it's I immediately I wanted to transform, the idea to my collection. So it's like a little bit sculpture.
It's so funny that you say that. Almost everyone I've heard, every artist that I've heard talk about Brancusi, it seems like the main effect that Brancusi has, is that it makes people want to make something of their own. Yes, he inspires people to do things.
Really. Also, he play with different material, wood, stone, like marble, and also mirror. That's why the accessory from the mirror, also the inspiration from the exhibition,
I feel like I have a fresh perspective on Uma's work after this collection. We've covered her work a handful of times thus far, but I've never really understood what she was trying to do. I'm excited to test my new theory out next season. This fashion week ended with Coperni hosting the final event of the season. This is going to be a very different kind of review. Coperni has seen a lot of success with their cult favorite swipe bag. The couple behind the brand, Sebastian and Arnaud, have experience working at Balenciaga and Chanel. They are not new to fashion. More than any other brand that shows on the calendar, Coperni is an expert at creating moments. Though it's important to mention that Coperni wasn't officially listed on the calendar because their show took place after the last calendared slot on the last day. Anyway, some of the biggest fashion hype moments of the last 5 years all belong to Coperni. Whether or not you like this strategy, you have to admit that this does require a substantial budget and a lot of people coming together to make sure that this execution is just right. Personally, I'm interested in discussing the execution of this event and what it takes to put together what I have recently started calling a mega show. That just means any massive show with a lot of people and the infrastructure that has to be perfect in order to execute that well. Because runway shows do not just poof into existence. Much of the time, they're the product of a small team of PRs whose jobs have always struck me as just insanely difficult. It turns out this Coperni show at Disney has been 2 full years in the making. It does seem like with all the events that we go to, everyone who is running it is under this pressure of, do not fuck this up! And you can't everyone handles it very gracefully, but you can tell at this event and most runways, people are under a lot of pressure with this stuff. But the team in charge of this show was the ever professional and dedicated team at Lucien Pagès, and I want you to meet Natalie, the woman in charge of this event. She crushed this. Natalie was responsible for, in many ways, the event of the week. No pressure, right? In the 2 months leading up to Paris Fashion Week, this event was on everybody's list to get an invite for. It's Disneyland. On top of the stress of managing a regular runway show's invite list, dealing with who needs to attend this spectacle must have been an even harder task when everyone wanted to go just 'cause it was at Disney. So we were lucky enough to get an invite to this show, and Danielle and I thought this would be a really good opportunity to talk about how mega shows are handled in fashion. First off, Disneyland Paris. That is a 45-minute car ride outside of the center of the city. It's pretty easy to just take a train from Paris out there. The train system is set up for that, but we were told to go to a specific address in the Bastille area of Paris. We got into a chauffeured car and were escorted straight to the event, so there was no confusion for any of the guests. So that is a car service that drove us to the event, and then after the event was done, drove us back to the address where we were staying. So we have been to a Louis Vuitton event before where everyone was given a free chauffeur ride back to wherever they're staying so that the people who do drink are able to actually enjoy their time. But coordinating to the event and back from the event, that's a lot. When we arrived, the park was essentially empty except for a team of Disney employees spread around the park and, of course, members of the Lucien Pagès staff, ensuring that the people coming into the park were in fact invited and also that the invited people got park bracelets. After we arrived, the iconic Disney costumed characters were greeting all of the guests, and the people in those costumes, the people running the park, are not just there for fun. Mickey, Minnie, and the rest of them have bills to pay too. This was all still very coordinated on the part of Disney. We arrived to a cocktail party where show attendees mingled on Main Street, USA until everyone had arrived. So, no pressure. Just make sure everybody gets there on time and throw in a cocktail party while everybody waits. Lots to plan so far. The fashion horde then made its way towards the castle. This event was fascinating for a few different reasons, but to me, the best part was seeing hundreds of fashion people that normally I do not see so much as smirk, skipping, laughing and joking with each other. Some people wore Mickey Mouse ears to the event with their regular fashion outfit just because they love it. And a few people outed themselves as obsessive Disney fanatics, which we were not aware of. I would play the audio of the hundreds of people laughing, but I can all but guarantee that the instrumental music to the famous Disney songs that was always playing in the background would copyright strike this video into the next dimension. Famously litigious, that company. The castle and the courtyard in front of it was where the runway show actually took place, this big brick roundabout. Before the show, the castle itself was guarded by a few men in suits, which just made it obvious that the models would be coming out from there and you can't go back there. We found our seats and the show started. Coperni did make major references to Disney themes throughout the collection. There were clear delineations between who were the villains and who were the princesses. Those delineations were made more interesting when you realize that Coperni enlisted the services of basically every single supermodel that I could think of. And while models are not typically something that we cover on this channel, it was really interesting to see Coperni essentially make a real-life version of a BuzzFeed quiz to figure out which Disney princess you are. using the most famous supermodels currently alive. Some favorites included channeling Maleficent, recontextualizing some princess dress motifs, and these hidden Mickey heels worn by professional model and friend of the channel, Ella McCutcheon. Who is like that? She's like in your top 3 favorite models working, right?
Yes.
The Disney experience wouldn't be complete without custom pyrotechnics, and those do not program themselves. I know that Disney in the States hires professional firework engineers and experts to create their world-famous fireworks shows. Another highly specialized job that has to be executed just for this event. So the big viral moment this season, outside of the insane details of the event itself, was Kylie Jenner closing the show in a modern and sleek princess gown done up in all black. Something that I saw on Instagram reminded me that this isn't Kylie's first time walking a runway. Her last time walking was for Yeezy Season 1. I'm betting that coordinating just Kylie's presence alone was a job for multiple people. After the show concluded, Disney kept the ride operators late so that hundreds of fashion people had the opportunity to just wander and ride the rides. And they didn't tell us about that beforehand. I just assumed walking into this event that there would be no arrangement that would make it possible for us to ride Space Mountain at midnight. But I rode Space Mountain twice in 10 minutes at midnight.
Oh my God.
Also, it was importantly not Space Mountain, it was the French version, so it was Hyper Space Mountain, which is Star Wars themed, and I got to hear C-3PO speaking French, which was fucking hilarious. Other people that we saw get onto Space Mountain were the legendary buyer for Bergdorf Goodman, Linda, the supermodel Arena Shayk, and Lucien Pages's right-hand man and every runway show's door guardian, Jonathan. If you know, you know. Food and drinks were served on a massive scale. We got Mickey Mouse shaped tater tots and burgers. We honestly would have stayed the entire time, just as late as they would have let us if we could, but we had a flight to catch the next morning, so we had to go. Danielle and I have been to mega shows by most of the household names of fashion, but all those shows kind of paled in comparison to the scale and magnitude of what this was. This season, instead of creating another digital first viral moment like the spray-on dress or the robot dogs or the moving walls, Coperni decided to create a actual once-in-a-lifetime experience for fashion professionals whose sum total enables the success of their brand in the first place. And this experience just wouldn't have been possible in the first place if not for the hard work of Natalie, her assistants Raphael and Louise, and basically everybody at Lucien Pages who enables us to have a safe and efficient and excellent time every single Paris Fashion Week. Every fashion month they put on dozens and dozens of events all over the world, but with this event specifically, they really outdid themselves. I gotta hand it to you. Massive congratulations to all involved. This was an awesome way to close out Fashion Week. And then in the outro of the video, Bliss even has a haircut to demonstrate that time has passed. Hi everyone. If you are still here watching this video, we are incredibly grateful for that. We don't take it for granted at all that you give us this much of your time. We're honored by that. We really pride ourselves on having the most info-rich content about fashion. Like, you will learn more things per minute in our videos than anywhere else on the internet. But what you may not know is that these videos, while being the most ambitious project on this channel, these are always loss leaders for us. Like, when I first started making videos, I made a promise to the audience that I would keep making the most high quality videos about fashion that I could possibly make. Now, Daniela and I are as passionate about that as ever, but we make no money from these videos at all. They're loss leaders. Yeah, it is about $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 per video to make these. And I mean, I don't know if you know much about how YouTube like pays you and stuff. We make up maybe 15% of that money on YouTube. While other publications try to convince you that fashion is only interesting in its proximity to celebrity or to makeup or to living some kind of rich lifestyle, Daniela and I really firmly believe that fashion is plenty interesting in of itself, full stop. And while most publications put out reviews of runway shows that are just copy-pasted from the press release, we believe in really examining this work closely and that will always result in a better product. And lastly, I hate saying this, but while most of the fashion media is occupied with doing the smallest amount of work possible, Daniela and I believe that putting real work and effort makes a meaningful difference in the overall product of what we offer. These videos are just an insane quantity of work, but when we look around at the fashion media landscape, if you are someone who, like me, when I was a young person, would get online and just say, like, I want to learn about this the way that my literature professors talked to me about incredible books, I couldn't find anything. There was isolated articles here and there, but there was essentially nothing that would just allow you to swim around and explore and learn about the art of fashion design. If you want these to continue, we can only do that if you support us financially through Patreon. There's perks. I've talked about it in this video and every other video we've ever put out. But yeah, it really comes down to where you derive value from. If this is just something that is kind of flippant and you just sort of have it on and you're about to go to another channel, then this is not for you. This message is not for you. But if you are someone who derives value from these videos, I just ask that you put that value back into the channel. And subscribe and put on notifications because we have got some crazy stuff coming up after this. We're really excited to start writing again. I love you all. Oh wait, you know what? We never did the favorites thing. What was your actual, like, of all the runway shows you went to, what was your actual favorite?
Probably Balenciaga.
Balenciaga? Yeah. I mean, that was like the first one, and you really got a good one for like the first one. Daniela wrote the Balenciaga review. She did a really good job on it. That was an incredible starter show, as it turns out.
My favorite single look is from Akris, though.
Your favorite single look is from Akris. Which one?
The hat band skirts.
The hat band skirts? Yeah. Well, now I need to figure out what my favorite look is, because mine was Akris. The hat band skirts as well. That's going to be mine. Their textile innovation stuff is so fascinating to keep tabs on, because they're never trying to like, they're not trying ever to like just be like, yo, check out, this is the sickest, like craziest, like it's like covered in, it was like tanned using piss, or like something just bananas crazy, like reads really well for a tweet. It's always just stuff where it's like, this was the best solution for this problem I was trying to solve, and we're really proud of how it came out. Like, they wouldn't talk about it unless we asked them, but every time we ask them, we get cool answers. Loved that. I'm tempted to say that my favorite look out of everything was the all leather like gimp look, because I just could not stop thinking about it when I left. But
well, Issey was best all around, I think.
Wait. You and I can agree on that. Yeah, is that Issey is best all around, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Like, just as far as like, this is a good runway show. These products are cool. The clothes themselves, like the samples are cool. The final product that will come out of this is very cool. And like conceptually as like a piece of art, very, very well executed.
I think it was, because of that, the best this season.
I think my favorite show of the entire week was, I mean, like you already know this, ERD. Enfants Déprimés just is in such a incredible golden era right now. And it just seems like such a brilliant case study of fashion as art, and then fashion also as objects that you can take with you and just live with them for forever. I mean, like when we went to the store, it was just like, man, this stuff is bananas. Like, love everybody. We had a lot of really good stuff this season. Y'all, I cannot tell you enough how much it means to me that you would sit and take in this entire thing. To any like classrooms full of fashion students or any types of students, hi. I always freak out when someone just shoots me a text that's like, yo, you're like in my classroom today while we have like quiet sketching time or something. Always honored. Y'all are the best. Yeah, hit me up on Instagram. Let's talk. I feel like I haven't talked to people as much lately. So yeah, my DMs are always open. If you have a question or something, I'm always down to talk about clothes. Love you all a ton. Peace.